Stephanie, can you hear me?
I can. You're a touch faint, but I can hear you.
Okay. Try to fix that. Better at all, Stephanie?
Yeah, so much. I can hear you loud and clear.
Cool. Hi. Hey, Jim.
Hello. I'm on.
We're good. Are you unmuted over there? Are you unmuted?
Okay, can you hear me? Yep. Think we're good?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get started.
You ready? All right, meeting is
Ready.
called to order at 7:02 PM. Chair Williams,
Here.
Vice Chair Reese,
Here.
Present.
Commissioner Glasser, Commissioner Duggan,
Yep, here.
Commissioner Herring,
Here.
Commissioner Dye,
Here.
Commissioner Rivera,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahold,
Here.
and please note for the record that Commissioner Cornell is absent.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's do the approval of the minutes from the October 25th Planning Commission meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review them? They have any corrections, changes, comments?
They were well done.
Actually, I had a few. So on page 4, here. Okay, there's public comment. A lot of these are minor, but there's a public comment, a stray public comment, I called it, just before the start of discussion items. Because we had the public comment on non-agenda items previous to that. So I think that's just a holdover. Page 6 on, let's see, the fifth paragraph from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, May Gerald was given another opportunity to speak by Chair Cornell. Unless I've been replaced, I think that's Chair Williams. Okay.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
This is true. And then let's see. Now this would be the seventh paragraph from the top.
Fisher
Where
explained.
it's Chair Williams
Okay.
asked how teen, INV, it should be IN Inc., I guess.
All right.
Just a minor typo.
Steve, I could have written through this like 7 times. I don't think I would have noticed
Oh,
this level of detail. I appreciate you.
okay. Maybe I'm too anal. I think that. And then finally, at the very end on page 13. Let's see. 13, under 7.4, made a motion to approve the November meeting date being changed to November 26th. That should be 29th.
Yep, we know that now.
We know that now, or otherwise we missed the meeting.
Yep.
Okay. Those are my comments. Huh? Oh. Okay, anything else? If not, we have a motion to approve the minutes with the following changes. I guess I'll make the motion to approve the minutes with my comments.
I'll second. I mean, now. I wouldn't have her.
Okay, Commissioner Herring,
Vote to approve.
Commissioner Rivera,
Approve.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahold,
Approve.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reese,
Yes.
Chair Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Glasser.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any public online?
You do have Jonathan Parker as a public online, and Attorney Madsen's also online.
Okay. If, do we have any public comment on any items that are not on the agenda? Speak now. Having heard none, we'll close the public comment on non-agenda items, and we'll move on to action items. We've got 6 of them on the docket tonight. And just to speed this up a little bit, I will just go ahead and ask if any commission members wish to disqualify themselves for any personal financial interest or conflict of interest on any of the items, so I don't have to repeat this every time.
No.
Nope.
No.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's move on to action items 5.1, the use group table amendment for the private childcare on public lots.
Yeah,
And Miranda, I guess you are,
it's me. It's me all night long and
All night long.
introducing all of these. So, as Commissioner Duggan had noted, all of these have come before you, so I'm not going to get too in-depth, but of course, happy to answer any questions. What is before you tonight is an ordinance for the use group table amendment for private childcare on public lots. As a reminder, this is coming forward because of course there is a proposal to do childcare on a town-owned lot. However, that's really not the question before you. The question before you is really, is the Planning Commission comfortable with allowing the use group table to be amended to where it was previously a no, that private schools were not allowed on public lots, to change that to an R, so that under special review use, the town could consider a public-private partnership to allow private schools on public lots. The Board of Trustees is really interested in allowing this as a use, of course, with the contingency that's a special review use, as it is in residential codes. And really the point of this is, of course, to allow the conversation to happen. By no means, by doing this, are you saying that it automatically green lights any current proposals or that this will automatically happen. You're just saying that you're open to considering applications for private childcare on public lots under a special review use hearing. So Attorney Mattson drafted the ordinance that's before you, which is ordinance 854. And you really have some options here. You know, if you feel like this is appropriate and you could recommend approval to move on to the Board of Trustees, you could recommend approval with certain changes in which you would list, or you could recommend denial and then provide your statement regarding why you think this should go, this should be denied. And then of course it would be considered by the Board of Trustees.
Okay, very good. Attorney Mattson, do you want to make any comments about the draft ordinance?
I don't really have any comments to make. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. I did clean up some things to, you know, maybe clarify uses that would be allowed in public to be consistent with an amendment for the use group table. But other than that, it's pretty self-explanatory, and I'm available for questions.
Okay. Does any of the commission members have any questions or comments before I open it up for public comment? No questions? I know, like Tim said, we've been through all these, so the only question I had to just throw out there was that at the last meeting, there was some discussion that perhaps a school wasn't appropriate at that particular spot. But again, this isn't to look at just that one spot, it's to look at all of public zoning. So, but I don't know whether that is still an issue or concern or not.
For me, it's not. I think I appreciate the clarification that we're talking about a policy change on public lands, not a specific place. And this place, if a school goes into that particular one, there's a lot of hurdles in between that we'll get a chance to look at it.
Well, I do like the fact that the SRU is in place as a safety net so that, you know, it's not it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I think like having school as a possible use in public zoning makes all the sense in the world, right?
Mhm. Okay, let's open it up for public comment. Do we have any public out there who wish to speak?
So I know Stephen LaFavor just sent me a message that he's trying to get in and he wanted to give public comment.
Okay, and while he's doing that, let me just remind everybody that, again, we're not looking at the specific application, not application, but the specific issue of having a child care, but looking at the much bigger picture of just basically, you know, changing the ordinance to allow it to happen. Again, that will come under a SRU in the future, should an application be filed. Let's see, did Steve make it on?
Not yet.
Okay. No one else wish to speak?
Oh, there he is. And it looks like Kathleen's going to call in. Stephen, we're on public comment if you wanted to give your comment as you just jump on. We're on the use group table amendment for private childcare.
And so give your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
All right. I'm Stephen LaFavor. I live at 185 Thunder Ridge Road in Nederland, and also am executive director of Teens Inc. Commenting on the first agenda item, I believe, relating to the use group on publicly zoned land. And I guess my comment is similar to last time, that you know, there's the SRU process that any entity would have to go through to get a project to you know, happen on publicly zoned land, but also wish to just say that, you know, schools are in residential areas all over the place, and that's why there is that zoning to allow schools in residential areas, and just hope that the planning commission will move forward with this. Move it back to the board of trustees for consideration.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Anyone else in the public?
Kathleen has her hand raised and I know it takes her a couple minutes to dial in.
Okay. Is she calling in or?
Yeah, I know it takes, I can't see if she's working on it.
Okay.
I know it takes a couple minutes.
Kathleen, are you there?
Not yet.
Okay, I don't know how long we should wait here. If,
Or do you want to further continue a discussion until she gets on?
well, we could do
Would it be
that and then
appropriate for me to-
reopen public comment if
Maybe.
he's ready.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll close public comment for now and we'll move on to planning commission members for any further discussion. Let's go online first.
Kathleen's on.
Oh, she's on. Okay, let's reopen public comment. Kathleen?
Yeah, Kathleen Shabai, sorry about that. 32-year resident, 22-year business owner. I'm against opening up the use for public property of private enterprise. Straight up, don't know what else to say about it. Don't think it's right, and hoping you vote against it because this can drastically change things. It looks like a workaround zoning, honestly. I don't really care if there's an SRU taking place. An SRU allows for a workaround around zoning. And when it comes to public lands, they shouldn't be given up to private enterprises where 99.9% of the people in the public whose land it is don't get access or use. They lose their use. They lose their use. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm against this. And there are other people, by the way, who couldn't make the meeting tonight who feel the same way.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. Anyone else online? Okay, I'll go ahead and close public comment. We'll bring it back to the commission for any further discussion. As I said, we'll go online first. Jim Reese?
I actually am in favor of this. I think that it was a well-crafted, and again, we're trying to expand possible use on public lands and give opportunity for what the current, representatives of the town want to do. And this is kind of something that there's been expressed interest from community members, and the BOT has interest in it. Again, this is only opening this up to look at for possible use. This is not at all about, a specific project or application or any type of building that's going to be built that comes later. And for anyone who happens to be listening, in the room, an SRU process means that there is a very thorough look, and review of every project that is going to be submitted to the town. There's going to be at least 2 opportunities for it to come before the planning commission and get public comment. Usually we'll have it as a discussion item and then it'll come back as an action item. And public comment, all the neighbors are noticed. So I believe that this is the opportunity for people to be heard. If they have strong opinions about the use on that specific parcel that everybody's concerned about, the old town shop site, that'll be their opportunity to be heard. So I think this is, as I've come to understand this more, I think that the SRU process allows for public comment and everything and people to be heard. And so this will be, something that I think is positive, and I will support it.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, I concur with Jim. I think that this is a good opportunity to really explore more options for how we use that land. I agree that schools are part of the schools and childcare are a huge part of the fabric of any community, and given the limitations of that, not just in Ned, but all throughout the peak to peak area, I think that this is something that we should at least put on the table for conversation. And as Jim said, there's a long and very robust process that's still ahead of us. This is not necessarily approving a single project. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
My sentiments are similar. I think it's a good opportunity for public-private partnership for something that's very much needed for our town. So yeah, I don't have any additional comments.
Okay, Linda?
I concur with most of the comments. I do have questions on if this opens up all of the public land in town to the same type of applications. Definitely that'd be SRUs, but how much land is available within the town for different options like this? I realize that daycare is definitely needed in town, but I'd like to have a feel for how much land is available throughout the town for similar projects.
So the challenge, so town does own about a dozen parcels, and a little more. A lot of them have structures on them, like public workshop, town hall, vacant parcels where this could be done, only a handful. And then obviously, taking into consideration a lot of the slope of a lot of our parcels. For example, like we do own by the rink, but that slope is going to be challenging to build on. We're about to acquire, of course, Wingate, but that has conservation restrictions on it. And so it's really only a handful for consideration where this could be considered.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mike?
I had a question about the background of why the BOT wanted to revise the use group table as opposed to rezoning. That's probably largely irrelevant to this conversation, but is it-
Yeah, the Board of Trustees really felt like it was important to continue to maintain all of their parcels as public. When the zoning was adopted, some of these parcels would have been zoned elsewise, but the feeling is that if it's owned by town, it should be continuously zoned as public. And that was really, I think, the sentiment of the board versus wanting to rezone it to something like mountain residential or neighborhood commercial.
Makes
or something
sense.
different.
My second question is that are there other private enterprises of any type allowed on public land right now? I believe the answer is no.
Well, so there is an agreement with Teens Inc. Teens
Right,
Inc.
of
Chinook.
course,
Their
yeah.
current building is on town-owned property, and they have a lease agreement with the town. And so they're looking to, in essence, recreate that same agreement.
Yeah, great. But outside of Teens Inc., there's no other.
No.
And it's not allowed in current code.
There are some areas where, under the use group table, there are certain uses that may be allowed in which the town might want to partner with a private entity
Okay.
to execute that. But no, there's nothing current.
Okay, great.
I mean, in the use group, or the definitions under public, it literally, I mean, it's only one sentence long. And
Yes.
educational is one of the uses.
Yeah.
I get there's a difference between public and private education. That's something to argue about on a SRU, I guess, but it is a line item that we've noted, like, this is something we could use in public zoning.
Yeah, an example is like medical clinics are allowed under SRU. Town's not in the business of running medical clinics. And so that would be an opportunity for another public-private partnership
that
to
totally
do
makes
that.
sense.
And Nederland Elementary is on public zone, public zone, town-owned land, right? Is it town-owned or the school district?
I think
owns
the
it?
school district owns that.
But it's zoned public.
Correct, you're right.
And like, sure, yeah, the general public can play soccer on the field and
Yeah.
you can do that, to Kathleen's point,
Yeah.
But general public anymore can't go into any elementary school. You can't just walk into an
That's
elementary
true.
school
Yeah.
anymore, And me and my kid go play on the skate park all the time over at Teens Inc.,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's something that can be talked about.
Hmm.
I am unmuted, yeah. I'm not talking very close to it, but.
You could just move it closer maybe.
Yeah.
Or bend it down. whatever.
Timmy, we can hear you fine online.
Yeah.
Stephanie can hear me.
Oh,
Stephanie, tell them what I said.
Skate park, kids, no one can go in schools.
Yeah. And schools are good. And just wanted to
I
clarify.
heard it too. Sounded good.
okay.
And just
Anything else, Tim?
just for clarification, I'm just asking questions. I think that,
Yeah, identify
a-
yourself.
oh, I'm sorry, this is Mike Dye. I think that the school is a great use for public land. And I acknowledge Kathleen's point that, it's not a direct use to everybody, but it's an important resource source. And I don't think that realistically there's much other opportunity here. And it's a great opportunity for a partnership.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
I don't think my tiebreaker vote is going to be needed tonight. And I've opined on this. People kind of know where I stand. I got nothing more to add.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also in agreement with everything that's been said. I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think we're also protected by the SRU process. So I don't really have much more to add. So with that, do we have a motion?
Question of process. Can I make motions or am I passive on in this commission?
I think, well, let's ask Attorney Madsen about that. I think you can, but it's typically discouraged.
Okay, then I'll take the discouragement and I don't even need the advice.
Okay.
Recommend approval of ordinance 845 to amend chapter 16-32 of the Nederland Municipal Code to allow for private child care centers in the public zone district.
Second.
Who's the second?
Commissioner Rivera.
Rivera, okay.
All right.
Please take the vote.
Commissioner Glasser,
Yes.
Commissioner Herring,
Yes.
Commissioner Rivera,
Yes.
Chair Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan, Vice Chair Reese.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll move on to action item 5.2, which is municipal code edition for parking. Back to you, Miranda.
All right, so another request of the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees is interested in doing paid parking, but really in the process of that identified that it's appropriate to amend the use group table to ensure that parking is not only a use, but paid parking is also identified as a use. And so really what you're seeing here is this allows the ability for a lot to be converted for just parking. And then it also allows a lot to be converted for paid parking. What we're recommending is that it becomes use by right in neighborhood commercial, CBD, general commercial, and public. And that for residential zones, which really is just high density residential, that it's only allowed if that high density residential zone is in the DDA boundary district. And so I provided the DDA boundary in the packet, but it's not the greatest image. So I use an older boundary so you can see there's actually only one parcel that falls into high density. And so that's been kind of grabbed into this code. In addition, town staff really felt it was appropriate to streamline how paid parking would work. We want to make sure that from lot to lot, a user isn't going through different experiences, you know, that where one uses gates and people and others uses kiosk and QR codes. So this code does prohibit or does keep paid parking just to QR codes and kiosks. And we have language in there, kind of exactly how those are used, and some stipulations around those. So the question before you tonight is, you know, if you're comfortable approving this, you again have a motion to approve, a motion to approve with conditions, and a motion to deny for ordinance 853.
Okay, good, thank you.
And
Miranda, do we have any questions?
yeah, so just might be a stupid question, but
Name, just
previous, as Tim Duggan, previously in the code, we didn't address parking at all in any district.
We didn't have parking as a use. And so what the code says is that you can have up to 20 spaces on a parcel. But we determine paid parking as other commercial activity. And so that would require an SRU. So it was just a little wonky how parking is, which is why we felt like make it clean and clear, add it as a use, and make paid parking as a use.
Cool. So previously in a few zoning districts, up to 20 spaces were allowed.
It was really allowed anywhere up to 20 spaces.
Any zoning district.
Yeah, and so now we're saying, you know, if you want to convert your whole acre lot to parking, you still have to adhere to parking, you know, the appropriate parking size. So you can't just, you know, make tiny spaces and maximize your lot. You still have to adhere to ADA standards. And so that's going to dictate how many parking spaces can go onto a lot, but it just allows someone to truly just convert their parcel to a parking lot and have maybe up to 30 spaces without that current stipulation that was going to require an SRU to go above the 20 spaces.
Gotcha. Thank you.
any other questions?
And if a private, this is Linda Glasser, if a private individual has the property to put in a parking area, are they required or are they allowed to charge for that?
They would be allowed to charge for that. And so all we regulate in this ordinance is what they can use, which is QR codes and kiosks. We don't stipulate how they handle the charging. That's the private owner would decide how much they wanted to charge.
But they would be held to having the kiosk?
Correct. They could only do kiosk or QR codes. They wouldn't be able to do anything else.
Okay, thank you.
So kind of a follow-up question on it. This is Steve. Should technology change in the future and all of a sudden kiosks are no longer the norm or QR code is replaced by, you know, something technically more feasible, we have to go and change the code, I assume. My only concern was to have very specific, you know, technology in the ordinance.
Yeah, I think we recognize that yes, there's actually this really interesting camera system coming online that can kind of like snap pictures as you drive into a lot. And talking with the company Town plans to contract with Interstate Parking, they're actually working on ordinance language that they'll share with all their customers that can bring it in. They are feeling like it's a little premature, at least for Nederland to go that route. I think by not having those stipulations though, you then kind of open it up to a variety of different like you have Town doing it one way and then you go down to a lot down the street and they're doing it entirely different. I think we were really just hoping to try to create some consistency and of course are very open to, as the technology advances, you know, bringing forward ordinance changes that allow different types of different types of parking options, which could be like those cameras or other options. Happy to go back and draft that now. I just think we don't really quite have that code language. And I do appreciate that Interstate Parking is saying that they're going to draft it because they're going to encourage their customers to probably move to that system and they'll help us go through the ordinance process to get there.
Okay, yeah, no, I certainly appreciate the consistency factor of across the board, particularly if the town gets into the business of paid parking on town lots, then, you know, we obviously want to be as consistent because there's nothing more frustrating to a user than to, you know, not know exactly what to do when they come to the lot. So I understand that. But I was sort of curious what the process was should technology change.
I do think it's kind of like some of your other ordinances where someone could come forward and request that addition. And that would come before you all if they wanted to see that. Well, actually, I think Attorney Manson, was that going to be in chapter 11 or 16?
Yeah,
in chapter 11.
chapter
Yeah.
11 for the regulations.
So the Board of Trustees, the request could go before the Board of Trustees to add in an additional type of parking operation, paid parking operation.
So they could do that without having to change the ordinance?
No, the ordinance would have to change. They would come forward with a request.
Gotcha.
It's kind of like animals, right? They would come forward with a request to add that parking operation.
All right. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I'm struggling with why we want to limit the technology in this. I think that there's to those two. I just feel like we're creating more work for ourselves later. And you know, you go somewhere, lots of these cities have different things depending on which garage you go in. People figure it out. It's not that complicated. In fact, most of the technology actually just makes it easier, not harder. So I guess it seems like we're creating an unnecessary barrier here in the future and preventing, if we do move in this direction, if the town does want to go in this direction, just making it more difficult to adapt and evolve with changing technology in a quick way. And I'm not sure what we get out of it in the short term.
Right.
Yeah, and I think open to whatever the planning commission is recommending. I think that for staff, we wanted consistency, and so I think we need to define like what those are, those different types. The alternative is you just say, you know, you kind of scratch, Jennifer, Attorney Madsen, correct me if I'm wrong, but you kind of maybe scratch those sections and leave it just open-ended. You know, just knowing though that means every lot can do it. If you had, say, 10 paid parking lots, they could do it 10 different ways. And I think we're a small town, but it just felt like a lot of variety if we don't have a ton of parking spaces anyway, so if everyone's doing it slightly differently. But yeah, I mean, you absolutely could, I would assume, Attorney Madsen, kind of just scratch 11, 102, 103, and 104.
Well, I would keep in 102 doesn't really prescribe rules related to how the fee is collected. So if you wanted to open up possibilities for different options, then you would remove 103 and 104.
And then there just would be no specific, there wouldn't be a kiosk QR code. It's just saying paid parking is allowed, and you know, respect and support what the planning commission feels is right. I think we were just trying to be mindful of like user experience and how that might feel if you drive from lot to lot. You're looking for parking, right? And you're like, oh, well, town does it this way, but this person does it this way.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I can see both sides. Any other comments on that particular issue?
Yeah, Tim Duggan here. Question I have is if we if this change even if it results in one extra parking lot and it's paid parking, if you're someone like me, I might try to be like, well, I'm a clever person, I'm gonna just park around the corner for free, I'm not paying for parking. If you do that, you're probably gonna park in front of my house because I live adjacent to the downtown area, and there's 1,000 other people could probably say the same thing. So my question is are we addressing enforcement of parking violations outside of these lots?
Yeah, so that actually came up with the Board of Trustees last night because this is one of on their budget to do paid parking. You know, the conversation was really focused around recognizing that this may drive cars right to the T-Mobile parking lot, and that's something we can't enforce, right? It ends up on a private lot, but law enforcement was present, and they of course can write parking tickets in other areas of town. We will hire interstate parking that will regulate the paid parking lots that we have, but yeah, the enforcement that goes into your neighborhood would be handled by Boulder County Sheriff's Office and our law enforcement.
So if people were to start parking in the adjacent like high density zones, like in either Old Town or like Conger towards Lakeview, that would be something that would be under the surveillance of the sheriff.
Right, if there are no parking signs, and there are currently no parking signs on that side of First Street. And so that's something that the board may want to consider, is adding in more no street, on street parking or something of that sort. Because right now you can park in all neighborhoods, because it's not prohibited to park on street.
If there's not a no parking sign.
Correct. I mean, you have to have no, I mean, you can't park on street for like residentials, right? That's in our code that you have to have off-street parking, but if you're a visitor, people park on-street parking.
Well, sure, like
Yeah.
it's never a problem, like
Right.
it's no problem, but if, you know, suddenly there were 10 cars all the time in front of my house, that'd be a problem maybe, I don't know.
Right. We know, I think.
But I mean, but that currently happens when there's big events like, you know, music festivals and whatnot.
Right. You know, I do think that there are components, there will be a lot of lessons as the town implements this. There will be a lot of lessons learned, and the board talked about that a bit, of needing to be, you know, unfortunately, a bit reactionary and trying to address and mitigate the challenges that may come by choosing to do paid parking themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can anticipate everything, and perhaps that is, what is that impact on that residential neighborhood? And is there need for no parking signs or something of the sort?
Yeah, in the back of my head, I spent so much time in Europe, and in Europe, you know, it's just so much more dense there. So yeah, they've got a lot of paid parking in the city centers, and it's unbelievable how creative people will get to park their car up sideways, half upside down on a curb.
Right.
And unless you enforce it, like that's what's going to happen. I mean, we're a long ways off from that in Nederland, I think, versus Barcelona, right? But that's what it would trend towards eventually.
Well, for example, like, you know, Boulder ran into that problem, so they have permit parking, you know, that this certain area is, you know, permit only
Yeah.
and so forth, because some of those neighborhoods, particularly close to Pearl Street, got hammered with people.
Yeah, it's a great example.
you
Yeah.
know.
And Interstate Parking, which is the company the town plans to contract with, actually can do that, where we start to create, you know, residential parking permits. And so if you didn't have a residential, it was zoned, this is residential parking only. If you didn't have your residential parking pass, then law enforcement or even potentially interstate parking could do code enforcement. That is a service that they offer, not something we've engaged with them right now. But if this ordinance, once this ordinance passes, will bring interstate parking in their agreement before the Board of Trustees to really negotiate things like that of do we want to add in the residential parking, maybe at least in the downtown area where we know the impact. We probably don't need it in Sunnyside or Big Springs, but could see that in like maybe general commercial zones or anywhere within the district.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be like a slow process and a slow trend. Like, again, you compare to Boulder, and, you know, I know every street in Boulder, so I know exactly where I can park for free for, you know, 3 days if I want to, versus across the street, you need a permit. You know, you'll get a ticket maybe if you're parked there for more than 2 hours. I think we're a bit off from, you know, getting to there in Nederland, but that's, I think, the direction it will head towards. And sorry, the point of this is, you know, I think so many people that are going to be utilizing the paid parking, they don't have a clue. Like, they've never been to Nederland. They have no clue. They're like, yeah, I'm happy to just park right here in the middle, pay $4 instead of wandering around neighborhoods and then wondering the rest of the day if my car is going to be towed, you know? So I guess my point is, yeah, I think it's just going to be it's not going to be like an overnight thing if we have paid parking, a big paid parking lot all of a sudden.
And the town does intend to do resident passes regardless, so that residents of Nederland can park for free. And there's going to be 15 minutes free, so you can run in and grab your sandwich at the deli and head back out. And so those things are going to be implemented too. So it's the impact on locals, people can do those things. But yes, we recognize that most people who are going to pay for their parking are going to be the visitors of our community.
Okay. And again, pardon my ignorance, Miranda. Like, I know in Big Springs, which is mountain residential, you're not supposed to park on the roads, right? You know, mainly for snowplows. Is that in the code anywhere else, or in any other zoning districts? Like, you can't park on the street?
Yeah, so there's
Not that it's enforced or not, but.
Hey, Timmy, this is Jim Reese. I live on Barker in Big Springs, and that's not accurate. People park on the road all the time out around here.
Well, that's my point, Jim, is like, it's in the code, I believe. I mean, there's signs, right? But
No, there's not. There's only along Big Springs on one side, but everywhere else in Big Springs
might be right,
neighborhood,
yeah.
you can park on the road.
So
It's public parking.
the code does require, new construction, we look for your off-street parking. But to your point, we recognize that a lot of these neighborhoods, off-street parking is next to impossible. So enforcement is not big for us. All of Old Town, right? It's most of that.
Right, and I'm not asking for
Yeah.
that, I'm just.
But there is a whole section of code dedicated to off-street parking.
Mhm.
So it is in our code, and new construction, we obviously look for that. There's just historical, so.
Thank you.
And a follow-up question along those same lines. This is Mike Dye. I was wondering if parking violations is something that the Boulder County Sheriff's Office will enforce under the current contract, or would that need to be added?
So interstate parking will do all the enforcement.
Okay.
For the paid parking, and then what happens outside of that paid parking will be
Yes.
Boulder County to do.
And is that enforcement like of outside of paid parking lots, is that currently under Boulder County
It is.
Sheriff's Office contract? Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, so like technically,
Yep.
visitor center lot is 2-hour parking. Boulder County could, maybe
Okay.
should enforce that.
Yeah.
But for us, the visitor center parking lot and the north side of First Street would have interstate parking doing their rounds to ensure that people have paid, or that they don't
Understood.
overextend their time.
This is Steve. Miranda, did I hear you correctly say that local people could park in a paid parking lot for free?
Correct. That was the desire of the board, that Nederland residents, so sorry, peak to peak neighbors, Nederland residents would be able to register for a resident pass and park for free.
Oh, okay.
That's in the current ordinance on the table.
It's not in the ordinance. So this ordinance is just universal. And then the town will work with the board of trustees to figure out exactly how we want to do paid parking. All that the ordinance keeps
On
us to
lots
is
that we own.
on lots that we own.
Got it.
Yeah, just the two. But so that's not in the ordinance. That will be just kind of our agreement with interstate parking that we'll get to is how much are we charging, the resident passes, the 15-minute free, any other residential enforcement. That'll be done under contractual agreement with interstate parking.
That's town lots only, or is it also private lots?
That would be town lots only. If a private entity, they can work with whatever company they want. They can do this on their own if they want. They don't need to use interstate parking. The reason town will is that there's no staff time. It's a cost share, 50-50 split. Town staff don't have to do anything, and that was important to us. We don't have the capacity. And interstate parking is in a lot of mountain communities like Dillon and Frisco and Idaho Springs, a lot of our neighbors.
And has that worked out pretty well to your
Mhm.
knowledge?
Everyone's very happy. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just their ability and their customer service is exceptional. That's the whole point, is like, you're not trying to hunt someone down if you have a question or concern. Interstate parking is available 24/7 to answer questions. They handle all the payments, ticketing, enforcement, execution.
Execution. Okay.
So,
This is Commissioner Reese. This is Commissioner Reese. I just wanted to add a couple of points. So first, I want to go back a little bit and say, as far as the technology piece, this was basically based on what they're already doing in Idaho Springs, which is kind of what we're modeling this on. Is that correct, Miranda?
Correct.
And so we've already have a example of success. And if in 5 years or even 3 years, companies or somebody wants to come before the BOT and ask for this process to go again, I feel like that's kind of what we're here for. We need to make additions, and really what we're asking is to try and keep this as streamlined as possible. And if the staff is recommending it, and I was on the subcommittee, I'm recommending it. I don't know what Linda's opinion on it is, but I thought she was in agreement that we want to kind of streamline this, make it as simple across the board. And then if we got to, change it, in 3 or 5 years or 10 years for whatever the new technology is, we'll address it when it comes. That's kind of what we do at these boards. But in the meantime, the simplicity for, across the board was recommended by the staff. We looked into it and did research. I've been to Idaho Springs. It seems pretty, after I learned how to use the stuff every time I go back there, I'm not intimidated by it. So I see value in that. Secondly, public parking is public parking on a public roadway. Unless there's signs saying that you can't park there, people are going to park there just like they do during residence. There's a bigger plan. I've been for 2.5 years trying to work a bigger plan and presented multiple times to the BOT. It includes additional town parking sites, going and trying to expand parking on Lakeview Drive from Rodeo Court to the end, or at least back. There's multiple sites that we're looking at. So we're not stopping. We're going to look at adding that along with the signage and wayfaring to try and drive people so that it doesn't overwhelm neighborhoods, just so that they can avoid the $4, as you're saying, Timmy. But if that becomes a problem, it'll be something that'll get brought up and it'll be addressed. I just really like to see this get advanced. We've been working so hard on getting something down the road. And the other unspoken piece that I haven't heard Miranda mention is that the revenue from this plan is part of the budget for next year and is pretty vital to the town. So, we have some urgency to try and get this moved along to the BOT so that they can pass it and we could get it implemented. And my understanding is they're looking at trying to do this early in 2024. Is that correct, Miranda?
Correct. Yeah, the Board of Trustees is looking to focus on implementation and education in January and February. Make sure residents know this is coming. How do you get your resident passes? And then we would start, if all goes well, the goal would be for town to start charging in March.
Yeah. So no one likes change. There's going to be grumbles, but we'll figure it out. And my hope is that we would advance this as is with no changes and move it on to the BOT. And if we got to deal with some changes down the line, that's what we're here for. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Any other comments before Linda?
Yeah, this is Linda. And Jim, I do agree with what you're saying. After hours of research and meetings, I think we're on the right track. We've done a lot of the background on a lot of this, and I think it's a good plan to move forward on it.
Okay. Does someone have their hand raised, Miranda?
Kathleen Chipai, when you're ready for public
Okay,
comment.
we're going to open it up here shortly. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, Tim Duggan here, one more. So when the sheriff writes a ticket on Jefferson Street or something, for example, for someone who's not parking in the paid lot and they're trying to avoid that $25 ticket, that's going to go to Boulder County, not Nederland.
Goes to Nederland because it's written into Nederland's municipal court.
Gotcha.
Municipal code. Yeah.
Okay.
It's $50 actually.
So I mean, this may be a whole other question, but then what would the motivation be for the sheriff to do that? Because I mean, I guess it's their duty, but it's not generating income from the county.
So that's none of what they'll do. Well, none of what they do in Nederland generates income for the county, and they know
So
that.
when they pull you over in front of the town entry sign, that revenue is going to Nederland, not
Correct. And that's their really kind of like their charter. We expect them to write their tickets in town limits so that it goes
Right.
to our municipal court.
Right.
And
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's helpful.
Okay, any other comments? We'll come back to the planning commission here, but let's open it up for public comment first. And I see Kathleen has her hand raised.
Kathleen, you'll have to press *6. I had to mute you.
3 minutes, Kathleen, you know the drill.
Kathleen Chipai, I agree with whoever said get rid of the limitations on technology, and it will be a waste of time. It's a waste of time right now that we're going over this. I don't know how many times I've had to appear at board meetings and remind everyone we live in the United States of America, and any person in the commercial zoning right now has the right, by use by right, to have paid parking, any kind they want. This is like the town telling the deli what kind of equipment it can use inside because you want it to be consistent with the equipment in the kitchen at the community center. It's micromanaging. It's illegal. It's illegal. Okay. When the people from Colorado Tourism came out, they asked what I thought the biggest problem in town was, and I said, parking. And the person said, oh, well, Miranda told us that parking's coming up and there'll be parking. I said, there isn't a parking problem. What they're bringing up is they're saying that since you're adding it to the code, we're going to give you the right to have paid parking on your commercial land. And the guy said to me, there is no way anybody can do paid parking. And I said, no, I know that, but the town doesn't know that. And the town doesn't stop and listen. And how the town attorney can allow this to have spent so much time, and here you're saying you're legalizing paid parking. It makes no sense. Ron Mitchell, any day he wants, could go put up a poll without you passing this. And if it went to court, you'd lose. The town would lose. This is just insanity. This is the United States of America. We aren't being given rights by our codes and laws. Our rights we're born with, property rights and use by right in a commercial space for a commercial endeavor. No, the town doesn't get to pick out how Ron Mitchell does paid parking. And believe me, there's not going to be 10 paid parking. We all know 10 business owners aren't going to have paid parking. So this is really targeted at Ron Mitchell and trying to monitor and regulate what he does on his commercial space. And I found it appalling. It is just appalling, and it's un-American. It's un-American. It's disappointing. This is the Planning Commission, and yes, it is illegal per code to park on the sides of the streets. And why some people are allowed to do it all around Salto without their customers getting ticketed has blown my mind for years. But that's where it is in some areas. It only gets enforced when the people that are going to get the ticket aren't really liked, okay? So all I can say is it's legal for anyone right now without any passage of anything to have paid parking, and any way they want to do it. Take cash or have a meter or read a license plate.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. Anyone else in the public wish to comment? Okay, having heard none, we'll close the public comment and bring it back to the commission for any further discussion.
Tim Duggan here. To Stephanie's earlier point, and some of Kathleen's comments just now, I am maybe a little bit worried about how much regulation we're putting into like how, what technology is going to be. Like, I get the point, but if you want to have a high school kid in a little booth collecting cash, I mean, if you own the lot and paid parking is allowed, like, have at it, I guess, right? So not sure if we might want to readdress that or not. But I also understand the point of it, because if you've got, 3 paid parking lots in town, and it's nice to have some consistency. And I think that benefits the public, which will then benefit all the town businesses, because people know what to expect.
This is Mike Dye. How much does one of these kiosks cost?
I think it was, when we were considering buying them outright, it was going to be $15,000 for 2. We're not purchasing them though. That's the whole kosher for us, but
Understood.
yeah.
I was thinking about what you just said, Timmy, and that if you had 3 spaces that you wanted to collect money for during a big town event and happened to live in the allowed area, then probably wouldn't want to invest in a $15,000 kiosk.
Right.
Yeah.
So Steve, that's a good point. And I mean, if we remove those 2 sections of the code, that doesn't really preclude the town or even working with the private entities to come up with a system.
No. And again, we really just did it for consistency's sake. I think if the planning commission feels it's best to recommend approval with removing those 2 sections of code. Although I do wonder, Jennifer, what you think about 105, because it talks about tampering with kiosks. I think you would remove 103 through 105. It would not prohibit us from continuing forward with paid parking. It just means that how someone implements paid parking is open.
Yeah, I just feel a little bit of micromanagement going on in this ordinance that probably could be worked out without it in there. And as I said earlier, in the event of a technology change, we don't have to go back and change the ordinance every year or whatever, however often it comes up. So, Stephanie or Chris, any comments?
Just that in general, I'm in favor of not trying to, pigeonhole us into or locking us into any kind of technological solution. I think that should be left up to the provider. And again, I think it'll make us more flexible in the future as technology changes. Thanks.
Chris?
Yeah, as soon as Timmy said somebody wants to have their kid out front and collect, $10 for parking for an event, it reminded me of living in New Orleans and during Mardi Gras and driving and finding, somebody who wants to have parking for $8 versus $10, and hunting around or not hunting around for that. I'm kind of picturing the idea of hoping that our town has enough events going on where enough people are in town for something, and people could just freely use their property to charge whatever they want. And I think, being too specific about what equipment, it prices people out of being able to use their property how they want. So, that kind of opened me up to the idea of let's maybe remove that part of it and move forward without that piece. I think that's what I'd be in favor for.
Okay, thank you. Linda, any comments further?
This is Linda, and this would only be in the DDA area.
So only it's neighborhood commercial, general commercial, CBD, public, and any residential zones within the central business district, which actually only includes high density residential.
So if somebody outside of that area set up a parking, they could charge how they felt.
So they wouldn't be allowed to do paid parking.
It would not be allowed, period.
Correct.
So
Okay.
Mountain Residential, for example.
Right. Or Old Town is not considered, well, it's high density residential. It's not in the DDA district.
So it's only in the district. Okay.
Correct.
So it's pretty confined. It's pretty minimal.
Correct.
It's really that one lot, right? That's over on First Street,
Correct.
according to the map.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
And
any other-
this is Mike Dye, looking at the map. So there's a little area not too far from the beach, from the reservoir, that does not include the DDA boundary. I just want to make sure I'm reading the map right. So like First, Second, and Third Street, just to the left of all of the exempt properties that are pink, that is not in the DDA boundary. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Here, let me just maybe share my screen really quick to make sure. We look up here that we're talking about. Are you talking about right? Oops. Come down. Right here in the middle, this gap
Yes.
is not a part of the DDA district.
Correct. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Comments?
No, I'm comfortable with what we're proposing.
This is Mike Dye. I'll probably vote yes on this, but I just want to say it kind of breaks my heart that paid parking is a necessity in Nederland now.
Yep.
The neighbors of Chautauqua feel the same way, but it unsnarled a mess.
Yeah.
Well, at least they have parking sticker as a resident. So that's that safeguard that we talked about before, perhaps. That's even worse if we get to that point where
Yes.
you have to have permit
Yeah.
parking in this
Yeah.
area, so forth.
Yep.
But
And I do acknowledge it's a necessity.
yeah.
So.
But
Tom, sorry, to be clear, your comment about Chautauqua, I know what a complete nightmare it is, and compare that to just 5-7 years ago. It's completely different. So if you live on 9th Street or Grand or 7th, I would lose my mind. So, to be clear, did you have a fear, like, if we allow paid parking in Nederland, it will result in some similar thing like Chautauqua has?
No, I think it unsnarled a mess in the neighborhood, I don't mind paying $5 to go to Chautauqua and get a parking place. I think
Right.
it's well worth it.
Right. And you think everything that they did and are enforcing there now is better than it would be without it?
I do.
Gotcha. I'm in agreement. Gotcha.
Okay. Any other comments, discussion? If not, can we entertain a motion?
Well, this is Commissioner Reese. Are we going forward with it as written, or it sounded like there was at least 2 or 3 people that were looking at wanting to get the technology piece removed, but
I would put forward that motion to approve the ordinance, but without the language limiting.
Can I just jump in? I think it's a section, and Attorney Mattson, please correct me. I think it's section 11-103, 11-104, and 11-105 would be removed.
I would make it more general,
Okay.
just so that we can make sure that any other pieces that need to be cleared up are not limited to those specific sections.
How would you propose the motion be made?
Just a motion to recommend approval of ordinance number, what is it?
853.
853 with an amendment to remove the manner in which paid parking is performed.
Got it. In that case, I would recommend to approve ordinance 853, minus any language specifying the manner in which the payment is performed.
Okay, do we have a second? I'll second that.
is Commissioner Reese? Oh, okay.
Right.
Beat you to it. Okay,
Vice Chair Reese, you can go first.
Yes.
Great. Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Herring,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Rivera,
Yes.
Chair Williams,
yes,
Commissioner Glasser.
Yes.
all right. Motion passes. We'll move on. Oh. Okay,
I did see there we were able to compromise.
right, thank you. All right, let's move on to action item 5.3. This is the Housing Needs Assessment Code amendments, specifically ADUs. Miranda?
Yep. We had brought an ordinance to you, Ordinance 850 to you at your last meeting, and there was some discussion. As a reminder, this is to allow ADUs to be constructed before primary structures. Commissioner Duggan and Commissioner Cornell brought up a great point that, the way the code was currently written and the yard and bulk components, it would allow ADUs to be kind of handled under those secondary setbacks, accessory setbacks, and that really if you're going to construct your ADU first, it should be held to primary setback standards. So if you'll note in the ordinance, we have added in an accessory dwelling unit as a part of this certain uses within the use group table. So it's your minimum side yard, rear yard setbacks. You can see that accessory dwelling unit and that those those square footage match a primary structure. So just tried to make it cleaner by doing it that way. That was the primary change that is before you in this ordinance. And so looking to, hopefully you're at a place where you feel like you can recommend approval with additional changes, or denial of ordinance 850.
Okay. Thank you. So that the discussion that we had last meeting, the language, did everyone find that language to be what they were expecting?
The language in the ordinance?
In the ordinance, sorry.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, any questions regarding the draft ordinance at this point?
Yeah, I support this. I think it was mainly because we did that workshop, which was extremely helpful. really get us to drill down and understand that, because the meeting that Miranda was not here, I know we were in the soup. So I think I feel very comfortable moving forward with it.
Okay. Any other comments? We'll bring it back after I open it up for public comment, but
And sorry, one more thing, Tim Duggan here, without reviewing every single sentence. Did we make any changes regarding owner occupancy? Like, could you have a house and an ADU and the owner not live there?
No, so we kept the language in regards to,
To have
so
an
we have
ADU
unity of
means-
ownership, the fee ownership of the principal dwelling, accessory dwelling shall not be separated. So I know that that was controversial about, you know, could you like rent out both?
Right.
And so that was not changed, although that was an original proposal we brought forth.
Right.
But the
Gotcha.
planning commission did not want that.
Gotcha. Yep. Gotcha.
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that was correct.
Yeah, and that was never in the code. That was like an AIM recommendation, so we never put it into the code.
Right,
Right.
right. And I know we discussed it last time. I just want to make sure what we were doing
Yeah.
or not doing.
I didn't see that added. I just see things removed.
Yeah, and the other thing that you all had discussed was, you know, but if your lot was large enough, could you have multiple ADUs? And that was, the planning commission did not support that, so that was also not in this ordinance, just from the original recommendations from the subcommittee.
Okay, any other comments or questions before I open it up to the public? Okay, let's open it up for public comment. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak on this issue? Okay, if not, we'll close the public comment and bring it back to the commission for any final discussion. Timmy, do you have anything else to add here?
Nope. I think this accurately reflects our previous conversations. And I'd be fine with it.
Tom?
Nope. This is just one of those things I think we've studied. I'm really glad we did the workshop that clarified a lot of stuff. That was
Absolutely.
kind of breakthrough. It's nice having trustees and planning commission side by side and getting to the bottom of it. So I'm comfortable.
Yeah, the nice thing about that workshop was that it dispelled a lot of misinformation or misunderstanding, I should say, from the initial presentation. So, Linda?
Further comments on this, and I feel we should move forward on it.
Mike?
And same here. Looks good.
Okay.
I wish I could vote.
Stephanie?
Yeah, no comments, thanks.
Chance. Okay, Chris?
No comment.
Jim, anything else?
No, I think it's pretty good, pretty straightforward, and I'm glad we have a good understanding of it. And we'll see if this can make a difference in new housing starts.
Okay, would anyone like to entertain a motion?
This is Commissioner Dye. I move to recommend approval of Ordinance 850, amending Section 16-98 of Chapter 16 of the Nederland Municipal Code related to accessory dwelling units.
That was good.
I'll second that.
Second by Linda. Okay, go ahead and take the vote.
Commissioner Rivera,
Yes.
Commissioner Herring,
Yes.
Commissioner Glasser,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Chair Williams,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reese.
Yes.
Okay. Wow, we're on a roll. Okay, moving on to action item 5.4 in the same theme, housing needs assessment code amendments. This would be the use group table amendments for ADUs.
So when we brought this forward before you at your last meeting, it was just a discussion item to start. as you all noted, we had a work session where we put a lot of work into this. And the goal here is to really look at alternative housing, to open things up, to open up the use group table, to allow for alternative housing uses. So tried to help a little by highlighting on page 47 of your packet exactly what the changes are. And so maybe I'll just highlight that. We broke out residential. Right now, the current use group table has residential where all 4 residential zones are in one line. And so felt like it was appropriate to break those out so you could really see it clearly. What we've done here is currently multifamily dwelling units exceeding 4 was a no in public lots, and we put that as an R. We feel like, town has signed on to Proposition 123. It's a commitment to develop 13 affordable units. They're going to need the ability to look at multifamily potentially on public lots. And so again, only through SRU, this gives them the space to discuss with the Planning Commission and Board multifamily dwelling units. We also opened it up to where family care homes could be considered in all residential homes under special review use, but were then not allowed in neighborhood commercial, general commercial, and industrial. I think the feeling there that those were more residential in nature. It also opened up nursing homes and retirement homes that were formerly only allowed in high density residential to be considered through SRU in all residential zones. And then it was actually missing from the use group table if nursing homes were allowed for public. There was nothing there. And so we added in the no, that it wouldn't be allowed. We broke out to, before the use group table said, multifamily dwelling units under 4. And so we wanted to make that very clear so that a developer who comes in and says, can I build a duplex? It's on the use group table. Yes, duplex, triplex, fourplex, broke those up, left the use is the same except for in public, again, allowing it through special review use so that town could continue to evaluate affordable housing on public lots through special review use. The last is a tiny home village where it would be allowed for consideration under a special review in all residential zones, neighborhood commercial, and public. I know there was a conversation about village. The village comes across like, how many? As staff, we really felt that there's a definition. The definition says 3 or more. We felt comfortable keeping the term village because there is a definition, recognizing often we have to direct people to definitions. But do want to make it clear that if you're going to do a tiny home village, like you really are doing 3 or more structures. You're going to put multiple structures on a parcel. So that's why I felt that village should stay. And so those are really your changes. By allowing this, you open up in many ways through special review use, the opportunity to consider alternative housing options. So before you again is an ordinance requesting that you consider approval with possible changes, or denial of ordinance 855.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
So a quick clarification in the table in the draft ordinance, anything new is highlighted in yellow. Is that correct?
Correct. Anything that was a change, a deviation from the current use group table,
Deviation or
or an addition
Okay.
is highlighted in yellow.
Okay. And second question is, so the term tiny house village how universal is that definition, or is that just something we're doing?
I think the term tiny home village is pretty common these days when you're looking at multiple tiny homes on a parcel. I can't quote to how common that language is. I've always heard of references to multiple tiny homes as a tiny home village.
Yeah.
I don't know if Timmy can.
I was just gonna say, other than trailer park, that's the only other term I've heard.
As a village.
Yeah, as a village, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think the definition needs to be consistent with what is considered the, common use.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah.
Even though it may convey
10 or 20 units, right? But
trailer park.
yeah.
And just a reminder, we added this in and and it hopes to kind of open up the conversation, right? We'll assess through SRU, like, is this doable? Because you still have to meet all yard and bulk. You're going to have a very large parcel, and depending on the size of your structures, you may only be able to do the 3 because you still need to meet all yard and bulk. And so by allowing this SRU, though, it opens up the conversation where currently it's not even a conversation. You really, it's primary home and ADU. So this allows for the tiny home for us to evaluate through SRU, is this even feasible?
So-
And then maybe in years, if it becomes, yes, it is, those regulations could change. But SRU, what I love about SRUs is it just opens up the conversation.
And it's not used by right.
Correct. Nowhere is it used by right.
Okay.
And to your point, Miranda, to be clear, triple clear, it doesn't mean in, say, low density residential that you can just throw up a triplex because you want to. It means in order to do that, you would need a lot that's 3 times the minimum size of low density residential yard and bulk.
Correct. Per unit. Right. Right. So those are all still in place.
Yep.
You've got obviously opportunities, ordinance to come that you're going to review next, that if you deed restrict it, you could negotiate 50% yard of bulk. You know, we're giving avenues in which those conversations can happen, but yes, you're still going to have the parcel size to do these structures. So it's not trying to maximize lots everywhere we go, but just opening up where it could be possible.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. Any other questions or comments at this point? I know we discussed this a number of times. If not, I'll open it up for public comment. Anyone in the public wish to make a comment on this item? Okay. Having heard none, I will close public comment.
Kathleen has her hand raised,
Oh,
but
Kathleen?
she'll need
Okay,
to
so
call in.
sorry.
She'll need to call in and it'll take a
Oh,
little bit.
all right. Is she the only one?
Yep.
Well, she's, yeah.
You're coming across broken up, Jim.
Can you hear me? Can you
Now
hear
we
me
can.
Okay.
Yep.
I do want to thank the staff for the good job they did in responding to our confusion when we tried to look at this a few months ago, or 2 months ago, and coming in and giving us, really clear direction and leading us through this process, answering all the concerns. So good job. Kudos.
Yep. I second that. Okay, is Kathleen on yet? So she's just not on all the time, is that?
No, so it's my understanding that she doesn't have microphone capabilities when she's on using her computer. So she has to dial in to give public comment. And that's, if you've dialed into one of these, that's an adventure.
Why don't you just stay dialed in? Just a thought. Okay, well, let's, in the interest of time, we can come back to Kathleen when she's available. So I'll go ahead and temporarily close public comment and open it back up to Planning Commission for further discussion. We'll start online. Jim? She's on now. Okay. Spoke too soon. Okay. Kathleen, I'll open it up for public comment. Kathleen, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. I only
No
have
worries.
landline and my phone died, so I had to go borrow my husband's cell
Okay.
phone.
Okay.
Kathleen Shibai, I'm against this use change. I also know that specifically May Gerald is against this change. And I'm just curious as to how many lots actually qualify for this change. I mean, is there qualifying lots, and have they been identified, and where are they? I guess are my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. Miranda, can you answer that or?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say we have a complete audit of all parcels, but you've got some low density residential that could consider, tiny home is down to 100 square feet. So you could have a low density residential home that puts 3 tiny homes on it because there's options there. Yeah, we haven't done a complete audit. I mean, that's something we can do. Again, I just think that the point of this is to open up the conversation, not to kind of predetermine where and how people might build. I mean, to me, that's their option. And if someone's really interested in tiny home villages, then we can sit down with them and talk about, okay, well, what is your square footage? What is the tiny home? What are the setbacks? What are the considerations here? Because even down to, the maximum lot size that or the maximum that you can develop your lot. I mean, all of those come into consideration. And so it's hard to say because your structures vary in square footage in order for me to truly be able to say X amount can happen here and there. Every build's just different. And so we handle it on a case by case basis.
Right. And again, let me emphasize that it is all SRU. So as you said, it opens the conversation, but it does not provide use by right. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Anyone else with comment? I see another hand up.
Oh, I think that's just still Kathleen's hand from before.
Ah, okay. If not, I'll close the public comment portion, open it back up to the commission.
And maybe can I just really quickly highlight, like,
Yep.
if you notice, if you look at all the highlights, like nothing was used by right. Everywhere where we opened this up was all special review. That was really important to you all. And sure, in a couple of years from now, you may decide this is no longer needs an SRU, but this just allows the conversation, it allows the applications, it allows the consideration. And so we feel like this is a small enough change to consider alternative housing and allow the Planning Commission, the Board of Trustees to ask some of these questions and to really evaluate, is what's being proposed appropriate for that zone?
Right. And what's important to me too is that it does provide a safety net. So again, we could opt to change that in the future, but for now, at least it opens the conversation and there is a safety net. Okay, let's go to online. We'll start with Chris. Any comments?
No comments.
Jim? Jim?
A baby
Can we
step.
hear you?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Are you hearing me? Yeah.
Yep.
Must be having problems with headphones today. So I agree 100% with Miranda that this is just a step towards trying to deal with our housing shortage. And, while it seems, some people may find it uncomfortable, the SRU process allows for public comment, neighbors to come in, give their opinion, for the Planning Commission to really drill down, look at every individual lot, how it fits into the neighborhood. All of those things will be considered before anybody builds a tiny home village of 3 or more. So I am in support of this. And as Steve pointed out, the SRU process allows for people to have their say in the public. And if the public is against this, they'll let it be known, and, we'll vote accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, much like the earlier discussion on, SRU review for schools or daycare facilities. I think this is what we're trying to do here, right? Is let the community have the conversation. And so, from that perspective, I think it's a small step in the right direction. But I support it.
Okay, thank you. Linda?
I think it's definitely moving in a good direction. It opens up the conversation, as Miranda has stated several times, and it protects and it gives opportunity for SRUs, and we can clarify things, we can review things, and I think it protects the whole process.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
I don't have much to add that hasn't been said. It opens stuff up.
Okay. And Timmy?
Same, yeah, nothing to add.
Okay, Tom?
The beauty of having studied this to death is I think we're ready to go.
Okay. Well, we have studied a lot of these to death. I admit that. I don't have any particular comments, further comments, either I agree with what's been said. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction, albeit I think, maybe Stephanie said a small step, but it is in the right direction. So I'm in support of that. So, any further discussion? Otherwise, we'll entertain
So Commissioner Dye, I do have a question.
okay.
I'm looking at the ordinance page 4 of 5 at the use group table, and under the last column on the right, the public. So would this mean that private entities would be allowed to build on public?
No, so that's only town. I mean, town could enter into a public-private partnership.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Under SRU. But
Okay.
yes, the
Yeah.
town could consider that.
Okay.
But they couldn't build a nursing home.
Correct.
Damn it.
As it currently stands. That was blank. I don't know why. I don't know
Yeah.
what that meant when it was
Yeah.
blank on the current table. I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no,
And
it was just a guess.
Some of us may need that.
I'll have to revisit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything
That's it.
else?
nope, that's it.
Okay. Entertain a motion? Anybody?
I did not already.
You did one already? Okay. Okay, why don't you go ahead?
I'm
Linda?
gonna do this one. I move to recommend approval of ordinance 855, amending chapter 16 of the Nederland Municipal Code to amend to the use group table to allow for other residential structures in the residential zone districts.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, go ahead, Miranda.
Chair Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan, Commissioner Glasser,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reese,
Yep. I think that was a yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Herring,
Yes.
Commissioner Rivera.
Yes.
Hey, thank you, Hurry. All right, motion passes. Let's move on to action item 5.5, again in the same theme, housing needs assessment code amendments, affordable housing yard and bulk.
Yes. So last month for this housing recommendation, we had a discussion with you all about allowing there to be consideration of a variance for deed restricted affordable housing. And so what the proposal was is that if your structure is 100% deed restricted for affordable housing, that a developer would be eligible to an up to 50% variance for all yard and bulk requirements except for minimum lot size and height. It would only be up to 15% for maximum lot size variance. And then there would be no height variances allowed. And what this means though, is that it wouldn't just be an automatic. The applicant would come meet with town staff. We would talk about what is the minimum relief needed for this affordable housing development. And then we would actually bring it to the planning commission for review. There was an initial proposal to bring it to the Board of Zoning Adjustment, but you all felt that the planning commission was a better fit. And so this would, the proposal that it was agreed upon between town staff and the developer would be proposed to the planning commission, and you would confirm if you supported that. The ask though is that that hearing is held without delay and that we would actually waive all fees so in an effort to remove as many barriers as possible. Point of this is that if you're going to build deed restricted affordable housing, you may need to look for some yard and bulk relief, and this allows us to have those conversations. So again, before you tonight is the ordinance that was drafted, and we're asking that you approve with changes, or deny ordinance 856. Recommend.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Comments at this point?
Thanks for defining affordable housing and attainable housing. That was a nice addition. This looks good. It looks like it's complete staff work.
And I think all of the comments we had from the previous meeting and in the workshop, I think are incorporated.
Correct. Yeah.
I went back and tried to look and see if there was anything left out. I couldn't find anything, but maybe others have. Linda, you have?
The fees that would be removed is that stated in the ordinance?
No, I don't think, Attorney Matson, we didn't note in the ordinance the removal of fees. Right? I don't think we did.
I'm not recalling that.
Yeah, I don't think we did.
Good catch.
Do you feel like, or is that something that Attorney Matson could go on our fee schedule?
Well, what
Do you think it needs to be?
particular fees are we talking about?
So on the fee schedule, we have a variance fee, and I think it's like $250 plus escrow, and so those would be waived.
Okay.
Do you think it should be in the
But
ordinance?
this isn't the same, this doesn't go through that variance process.
Right, but we added the separate line item for just variances because we recognize that we have a variety of variances, often variances to code, like water and sewer has a variance. So we created just a variance fee on the fee schedule.
Okay, but this section here that allows for a variance doesn't specify that a fee needs to be paid, I don't believe.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So because it doesn't specify a fee, we would then not charge a fee.
Yes, and so also I'm looking here, section 16-325C3, it says, it talks about requirements of the developer, and following the pre-application conference, the developer may submit an application. If the application is complete and the developer has paid the required fees, if any.
I guess I do, yeah, and I do like that because, they may have started some building process. They may have paid a plan review fee. I mean, there are a variety of fees associated with planning and zoning that they could have opted to pay separate from this. So thanks for that. I do like the if any language.
Okay, yeah,
So,
that's good. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Commissioner Dye, so it's fantastic that the definitions have been added into the ordinance. I do need to point out an inconsistency. So in page 50 of the packet, affordable housing is defined as serves those households whose income represents 30 to 60% of Boulder County area median income. And in the ordinance, it is defined differently. Affordable housing in the ordinance means housing developed in the town of Nederland, which the monthly cost, rent or mortgage, does not exceed 30 to 60% of Boulder County's area median income, meaning that it's based on the 100% area means income. Do you see what I'm talking about? Yeah.
I'm trying to find that in the ordinance itself.
It is
It's under
on
the definition.
It's on page 53 of the packet.
Yeah.
Under 16-322.
Right. 30 to 60%.
Yeah. So there's a significant difference in meaning in that
Right.
definition.
I think you would, if you're ready to vote, you would approve with the amendment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. In a similar vein, I'm looking at page 54 of the ordinance, page 3 of 5 in ordinance 856. It's talking about, so in letter A housing development is considered affordable if at least 10% of the total dwelling units are affordable to rent or own by households earning 100% or less of area median income. That's also not in line with affordability being defined with 100% as opposed to 30 to 60% of the AMI. And the same thing true of B and C.
So that should all read 30 to 60%? Is that what you're
If
saying?
we're being consistent with the definition of affordability, then yes.
Attorney Magson, could a motion just be made to approve the ordinance with the amendment that the affordable housing definition be aligned with the agenda, with the aim?
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Good catch.
Yeah.
Yes, good
Thanks.
catch. Well, I know it's close and near to your heart, so.
It is,
Yes.
yeah. And not to shoot myself in the foot with this, but I mean, and 30 to 60% may deter a lot of developers, as others have pointed out to me. Is 60% too low as the upper threshold? Like I mean, it'd be fantastic if this was realistic, to expect a developer to come in and say 60%, but I don't know. I have no expertise in the area of commercial or the residential development.
I thought we had this discussion as part of the
Yeah.
presentation. Do you
Yeah.
remember, Tom?
Yeah.
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 And
And maybe we don't need to rehash it.
Yeah, I think until we start to engage these affordable developers, and of course the town will need to do that. We're already starting it under Prop 123.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
we'll really put this ordinance to the test and see, and if that becomes an area of concern, of course we can come back to you and
It'll be called the Mike Dye
Discuss that.
exception.
we'll bring it back under that.
you'll be famous.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time we've ever, of course, even considered this, and town, you know, when there's been affordable housing developments with any sort of restrictions, it's been done by a housing authority. So this is kind of allows the town through public-private partnerships or on their own to really look at this development, and I think it's a fascinating journey we're about to embark on that we know nothing about. I mean, I think it's unique for all jurisdictions who are in Prop 123, who don't have housing authorities really embedded into their departments. We're going to learn a lot quickly about deed restrictive housing.
Another commission, perhaps.
I shall say no more and stop shooting myself in the foot.
Be careful what you ask for. Okay, any other questions or comments at this point? If not, I will open it up for public comment. Is anyone having seen none? I'll go ahead and close the public comment, bring it back to the commission. We'll go around the table and make any comments. We'll start with Timmy. Okay, Tom?
This is inspiring. It was only, Miranda, we just finished this housing study in September, right?
I mean, it's wrapping up. You'll get a presentation in December, probably.
Yeah, and although it seems we've been through this a lot, it's only been a couple months. It truly is, and I think we looked at the small sides, and I'm delighted that we're going to get this wrapped up. It was record time for a pretty momentous decision. I'm really excited to see what this brings.
I was amazed when I first read and listened to this. I was just overwhelmed with the detail and the complexity of it, and I was having a hard time grasping what are we trying to do here. And like you said, in a matter of months, I mean, it has really come together. So again, kudos to staff for a lot of that, helping us out, and the contractor too. Okay, Mike, let's see. Oh, we already went. No, Mike.
I got nothing more to add.
Okay, Linda.
At this point, do we have any deed restricted properties?
I'm not entirely sure the Tungsten Village makeup. I don't think any of that's deed restricted though, because it's not ownership. Not that I'm aware of. Okay.
I do think Tungsten Village is deed
Is it?
restricted.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I was surprised to learn that 6 units.
Right.
5 or 6 of them were like too low.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Can't hear you, buddy. Can't hear you online.
Oh.
That's because my microphone was off. I was just saying last time around we looked it up, and I can't remember if it was 5 or 6 units were deed restricted or 5 or 6 units were like truly low, like a lower
Permanently
income.
affordable.
Yeah.
Truly affordable housing.
But
Yeah.
the reality was, the majority of those units are kind of market rate, more or less.
I think Proposition 123 will be very interesting because just about almost every jurisdiction has adopted into it, but it is a requirement that it's deed restricted and town committed to 13 units.
So we've only used up 2 of our 36 months. We better get going.
Right. I have a meeting on Friday.
And one more clarification. So if I'm a developer and I want to talk to you, town, about a variance, but I want to do a project that's attainable housing, not affordable housing per these definitions, am I entitled to these same rights or no?
No, but you could come and talk to us about that administrative variance that you passed at your last meeting. That is the 15% variance to yard in bulk with minus a height.
15, but not 50. That's the
15,
gap.
1
That's
5,
this whole
yeah,
conversation.
is
Yeah.
all you can come and get administratively. Otherwise, you can go before the BZA, but you're going to need to prove hardship.
Right. And I made the comment, we should change it to 17% so we don't confuse them like I'm continuing to do. But
That ship has sailed. That one's before the board of trustees.
blew it.
Did you say 70?
Yeah, so not that one either.
That ship has sailed.
As long as it's affordable.
That's right. Okay, Stephanie, any comments?
No, this is there's a lot in here. And I'm sure there's, the definition of affordable housing thing kind of took me a while to get my thoughts together around that piece of it in particular. There's a lot of different ways to define that. And I think that some of the current ones that we have, even for, Tungsten Village, may or may not. What is actually affordable, I think, is up for debate. But, like many other things tonight, probably a step in the right direction. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
No comment.
Okay. Jim? Yeah.
We
Okay.
do.
We do.
Yep.
Well, I take that back. You're coming across broken up?
I heard the word support.
Yes.
Yep, thumbs up. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that the commission was happy with it coming before us rather than the BZA. I know we had that extensive discussion, and I think that was the general nod that we got last time. No nods today because we're action items, but okay. And I don't have any additional comments either. Again, I want to echo Tom's comment. We've come a long way in a short time, so. Okay. I'll go ahead and make a motion. I move to recommend approval of ordinance 856, amending chapter 16 of the Nederland Municipal Code related to affordable housing and providing a unique variance process to promote the development of affordable housing. Was there also a caveat to that?
Yes, with the following changes of amending section 16-322, the definition of affordable housing to be in line with serving those households whose income represents 30 to 60% of Boulder County's AMI, as well as amending section 16-323, the eligibility sections of A, B, and C as well as other sections in the code, if there are other places where affordable housing services are mentioned.
Okay.
Well done.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay. Let's go ahead and do the
Alright.
vote.
Chair Williams,
Yes,
Vice Chair Reese.
he said.
Yes,
Thumbs
okay.
up.
Commissioner Herring,
Yes.
Commissioner Glasser,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Rivera,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan.
Okay, motion passes. And let's see, let's try to knock this one off before we take a short break. We'll move on to our last action item, 5.6, which is, I said this many times, the Keeping Animal Code amendments.
I'll do a quick introduction and then I'll turn it over to you, Commissioner Dye. So this came before you last month, but Commissioner Dye had the opportunity to meet with some animal owners and wanted to offer some recommendations. So you opted to really postpone this to tonight. And some of the conversation that you had initially, though, was around focusing specifically on the pet fancier permit and that it was a little bit complicated and that it was included other animals and it really was meant for just dogs and cats. And upon further discussion, they really felt like a permit wasn't really needed. We didn't really need to kind of add all these limitations. And so there's some language changes related to that pet fancier permit that just kind of identifies the total number that are allowed of dogs and cats, but no permitting process. The subcommittee recently met, though, and Commissioner Dye had noted that in some of his conversations, some livestock owners had really identified that donkeys, mules, yaks, alpacas, and sheep are not much different than the horses, llamas, and goats, and would really like to have a conversation about considering adding those into that large domestic livestock definition. The subcommittee really felt like, let's just bring it to this group. And if that's an interest of you, you can add it into your recommendation for approval with those amendments. If you don't feel that that's appropriate, the ask of staff is that we would still bring that recommendation onto the Board of Trustees for consideration. But of course, want to start here. And Commissioner Dye, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you. Excellent introduction. I wanted to say that I don't think we need to rehash the discussion about which animals are necessary tonight. I think that can be passed on like in a private message or public message to the Board of Trustees from myself. While I do think that additional animals should be considered, I really don't want to hold up this process or rehash discussions that we've already had here. I also really want to give a lot of credit to Roger, who put in a lot of time and effort, far more than I personally did. And I'm thinking about him and hope he's doing okay. Like Miranda said, the primary change here from last time was with the pet fancier's permit. That has been removed, and we replaced that with a limit on cats and dogs, 5 cats and 5 dogs, up to a limit of 8 total animals, and the limit on other pets have been removed. I did have, as in last week, some conversations with some neighbors and residents here. I just wanted to say that and this is a question, so that regarding off-leash dogs, barking dogs, and dog excrement, is this revised ordinance as written enforceable, and do we have the personnel to perform the enforcement? Don't need to necessarily address that now. But I wanted to make note of that. Other than that, I think this is good. We've put in a lot of effort. There's been a lot of fine tuning, and really aside from the included hoofed animals, Roger and I are in total agreement. So that's it.
Okay.
Explain, I'm not sure I understand about the hoofed animals. You accepted them or?
So right now, as the ordinance is written, it would be limited to horses, goats, and llamas. My personal opinion is that, and this is based on conversations with keepers of animals, hoofed animals, that there's not a significant difference in the way one cares for, say, alpacas as opposed to llamas, or sheep as opposed to goats. So I was thinking, save us some work down the road, add those animals in right now. Like I said before, I'm totally fine with me expressing this to the Board of Trustees. in an email when this comes up in a meeting. I don't think we need to rehash it, but that's my thought. And then the reasoning behind it.
Thanks.
Right. Well, of course, the Board of Trustees can change this as well. So if you do have some comments, you could put those in. My only concern is, I don't know whether there are other aspects of these hoofed animals that might take more grazing land or something, and I don't think we've done enough research in that, or maybe you have, to just say, okay, let's include these others. But maybe if you have, such research or whatever, you could pass that on to the Board of Trustees.
I'd be happy to do so. The two of the people that I spoke with would also love to come in and actually talk directly with the Board of Trustees. They offered to come here as well, but I figured hand it off, as I've been reminded of a lot, sometimes by myself. It's been a long time that this has been on our plate, and I think it's time to hand it off. I think it's in good shape, including the domestic hoofed livestock definition, and I'm okay with it. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, if you will pardon the play on words. I did want to note in the summary that I'm really happy to see that there is language here about exceptions for current properties that have horses and large livestock. I think there's only one, but I think it's important to retain that. And I think this is a step in the right direction. And I think that should also be moved on to the Board of Trustees to have those further discussions where there's actual decision-making power, and not just a recommendation, but it's moving in the right direction.
How many animals, I direct this to both of you, are we talking about properties in Nederland proper with horses?
I only know of one.
Okay, Brian, is that accurate?
I also only know of one.
Okay, so are we just saying that somebody who currently has horses goes unregulated, or what are we saying? That they're not affected by what we're doing?
They must comply to this ordinance. It just means that they don't live in mountain residential, and so they're allowed to continue to have their horses. They are tied to this ordinance, but also that right is tied to the owner of the property. So if the property were to ever transfer hands, that does not continue with the property itself.
Is it for the life of the property owner owning that property, or is the life of the animals?
It's the property owner owning that property.
Okay.
So yeah, if their animal passes, they would be allowed to continue.
So they could get another
Correct.
horse.
While that person owned that property, but if that were to ever sell, the new owners would not be given that same opportunity.
Okay.
What about inheritance?
Yeah, and so, I think one thing that we've kind of talked with and even shared with that property owner is, they could look at a trust, right? They could look at something, putting their property in a trust so that it carries forward and there's no change of hands, in which case I would allow family members, after perhaps the person is no longer living there or whatever the case may be, could continue the animals. That's a private choice the person would have to make.
That would be one mechanism.
Right. It's just one example. I'm sure there are plenty of others, but it was just kind of one idea that came up when that was brought up, of a concern of like, what about my children? I think there are ways in which anyone who's kind of grandfathered in this case could look at allowing that continuation.
But theoretically, wouldn't a trust that's created after the ordinance is enacted be a new owner?
That's a Attorney Madsen question.
Say that again.
If
in a trust.
we enact an ordinance and then a
Right.
property owner, there's only one that I know of, decides
Then they
to
put it in a trust.
put it in a trust after the ordinance is enacted.
Yeah.
What's
Right.
the
That's a
practical
transfer
effect?
of ownership. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I
That
thought.
is, yep.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay, it's not a widespread thing. Most of the horse properties I know are along Ridge Road and out of town boundaries. Okay, then I got no other questions, and I think you did a yeoman's work. I really appreciate it, Mike and Roger.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Yes, absolutely. I echo that. Any other questions or comments at this point? Before I open it up to the public?
I did want to reiterate that I do think that the current property owner should be allowed to keep the horses, and probably within the family as well. I'd be in support of that. If I was in their shoes, that's what I'd want. But
So I think,
opinions may vary.
yeah, I think the one way to do that then is to allow it to tie with the property.
Right.
And not remove that like ownership transfer. And I know this is a conversation that's come up. You've received emails about that. That is an amendment you could consider. Is to have it just tied to the property itself. You know, the only thing kind of as staff we noted is that, you know, if there's without a transfer, you know, you just don't know if, you know, perhaps someone's loved ones are going to care for those animals the same way. And there's no additional like kind of permitting process. Of course, there's the enforcement if someone's in violation of the code, you know, but there just isn't any of that kind of upfront permitting inspection because you're not applying for a new license. But there are other mechanisms in which someone could express concern about the care of those animals.
This may be getting too far into the weeds, but I believe that property is a total of a half acre, and that includes the houses on it. There need to be an exemption within the code to allow for a smaller lot size under that as well. But that can be.
And I think that would only be if you were opening it up altogether to add in that zoning.
Got it. Okay.
If you're saying that this is
Never
just the exemption is that if you already have an animal, you can continue it. Even though it's recognizing that you're not conforming to current code.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think that would be probably the better way to do it, or you'd be looking at kind of revisiting, are you going to allow it in high density, medium and low?
Yeah, great. I had heard, I'd heard a rumor that there was a property in Big Springs with horses as well, but that remains unconfirmed. Yeah. Yeah.
There was a lot over on Wildwood that had horses because they used to take them down to the parade. This was years ago. The stable is still there. And I forget the property number, but the stable is still there, but I've been walked past there many times. I've not seen any horses. So I don't believe they have any at this time, but I think they would conform if the owners wish to, you know, get horses again.
Yeah, great. Maybe I'll take a drive up Wildwood, see if I can track down the owners, just with the intention of notifying them that this ordinance that may impact them is there and will become.
I can show you
before the Board of Trustees at some point in the presumably near future. Thanks, Steve.
Okay. Any other comments or questions at this point?
I'll comment on if there is a request to have a certain animal on property that meets the qualifications and the size. Are the surrounding neighbors informed of anything?
Not in the
No.
code as it's written.
Yeah, it would just be a permit handled, but there is no notification process.
I would like to see something where if it impacts the neighbors, they should have some kind of notification.
But are they going to have a chance to weigh in and go against it, or just simply notification?
I think they should be notified if it's going to impact their property, if it's going to impact their way of living. I think it's very important that there be something where they can oppose it or approve it, or at least have a voice in it.
Yeah, I worry if it's subject to the neighbor approval, like so many things, not going to be approved. But I have confidence in the structure we put in here that if an animal is allowed in Mount Residential, that they have to be a good neighbor with that animal. Otherwise, you know, there's enforcement, you know.
Who specifically? enforces?
Great question. But it's in the code at least.
Right.
I'm just saying, like, if we open it up to neighbor approval, I'm not against the idea, but I'm just saying if we, on one hand, if you open it up to that, then like, we might as well just not even worry about this whole thing and just not allow animals, you know what I mean?
And I guess it's, maybe I could just add, if there's that, maybe you're looking at more of a hearing process, because I'm not sure as staff, we're going to want to kind of administratively kind of weigh those things out. And
Right.
often you're going to hear from people who are upset and not the people who are supportive, right? And
Right.
so you'd really need to allow a hearing process. Otherwise, currently, after we issue permits, it is a bit of that complaint-based system afterwards.
And Linda, like, always you've been able to have a horse kind of under these same regulations in mountain residential. So, even if you bought a house in Big Springs 10 years ago, there was always the risk that your neighbor might have a horse. So I kind of see it as, it's not really that different. Yeah, now maybe your neighbor might have a llama, but there's still always the risk in mountain residential that your neighbor might have this livestock. You know what I mean? Well, what's your specific concern? Okay.
Sorry, we can't hear you online. Can you turn your mic on?
This is Linda, and I just am not, I recuse myself from commenting any further on this.
Perhaps I can offer kind of a bit of clarification in that, historically, because the code wasn't clear enough, my whole spiel, it defaulted back to a state statute. Then it was like all animals were allowed. And then there wasn't this zoning component. So now you've got kind of the two pieces here, is that you have a limitation to horses, goats, and llamas, and a limitation to mountain residential, where, some of the incidents that we've seen over the last couple of years is that you've had livestock on, medium density, general commercial, central business district, some of those other zones, where this tightens it up for us as staff, where it's like one zone, 3 animals. And I think that's, and I get to Commissioner Duggan's point, then yes, if you buy in mountain residential, which is primarily Big Springs, you would just be aware that this is a possibility.
In that one zone that it's allowed in is, normally it's larger lots. So you wouldn't have the situation where you're in high density and there's a cow living next to you, right?
I don't want to be subpoenaed again.
So if there was a possibility of a hearing process, how would that happen? What would the hearing be to?
Whatever board is decided upon, because I think, obviously you were given this, it's not chapter 16, it's a chapter 7. And so I think that would have to be determined. Who is that before? It definitely takes it away from being an administrative function, where the permitting process is handled almost like a new liquor license, and that there's now a whole hearing and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
What if the neighbors receive notification, and then if after some 15-day time period or something, the town or the property owner don't receive any notice against the idea of having a llama or whatever at the house, then it just goes on. But if they do receive notice from the neighbor, like, hey, no, I'm against this, I want to have a hearing, then we have a hearing. I don't know if some protocol like that could possibly work. I don't know.
Well, I understand the rights of the animal owner, and I understand the rights of the adjacent owner of property. And they should be some kind of compromise where there's a neutral agreement where they can live side by side without a conflict. And I think if you allow something to happen before a hearing, what's going to take it back? What's going to stop it from going forward? I think both parties need to be protected.
Yeah, I hear that.
Mhm.
I guess I'm just curious, like what's the specific concern? Like I live in Big Springs, let's say, and my neighbor wants to have a llama. Yeah, sure, I'm worried about maybe the welfare of the llama. I'm worried about the smell of the llama. I'm worried that it's going to attract mountain lions that are going to come eat my dog. I mean, those are all concerns that one could have, right? But, if my neighbor had 8 cats, which is allowed, wandering around in their yard, that would attract mountain lions too.
Only 5 cats.
Yeah. Well, the only concern too is that if let's say 2 neighbors just don't get along, period, and they determine, or one determines that, well, I don't want neighbor A to have an animal because I just don't like neighbor A. It has nothing to do with the animal. And I just fear that we're just opening this up to other grievances, not just them having an animal. You know what I'm saying?
Yep, I agree. I'd like to think that if you live in Big Springs and you want to have a llama and you adhere to all of this code, that your neighbor's probably not going to have much to complain about, right? I mean, that's how we would want to make sure that the code is, I guess.
As long as there's enforcement that can actually happen,
Oh, right.
right? And so I'd asked a very similar question about the enforcement over the last 18 months. And please correct me if I'm wrong, Miranda, but my understanding the enforcement, so say a permit is issued, person gets a horse or 2, the property falls out of compliance, the neighbor complains a couple of times, town staff would go out there and assess the situation. If there was some problem, animal neglect or manure all over the place, water running off, a violation of the code, then town could revoke the permit. Once the permit is revoked, the animal owner would have a certain amount of time to get rid of the horses and mediate the situation. Maybe there would be a warning in the middle, but I'm skipping down the road. And if they refused to get rid of the animals, who would it be that would respond, Miranda?
Well, so it becomes criminal if neglect of animals is a criminal charge, and so then it can escalate to law enforcement. And that might even come early on. And so code enforcement, as a part of kind of the inspecting authority, would consult with law enforcement, because that's where they'll step in. If anything is reaching animal criminal code, they'll take over.
Maybe the animal criminal code wasn't a best example. Like, okay, say the manure is running off into the neighbor's property, which was a violation of the code, arguably, well, possibly less severe than animal neglect and abuse. Would that still be the same people that would enforce it?
So it's going to start with code enforcement. So code enforcement will, and there would be kind of a notice that their license, their permit was being revoked. They could appeal it. If they do appeal it, then there's a hearing before the town administrator, and then the town administrator will issue a final decision.
And then the permit could be revoked.
Correct. Right, which could be continuing having the permit revoked, because the appeal would only be having the town administrator reconsider the community planner's decision to revoke the permit. And so the town administrator could uphold that decision to have the permit revoked.
So we're talking about creating a permitting system. It's not just by right, but you have to have a permit before you secure these animals?
Correct, because you need to demonstrate, your compliance with lot, your lot size, because there is a lot size component. And you have to provide the minimum requirements related to your sanitation plan, your feeding plan, that you have the fencing requirements. There's quite a bit in here related to what would be considered prior to issuance of a permit.
Okay, so that's
For new,
for new ones. But you're not talking about doing this retroactively to people.
Well, so Attorney Matz and I were actually just kind of had mentioned that perhaps there should be consideration that current owners have to comply with not only 7-122, which is that permit, but section 7-123. And that, when, as the town administrator acknowledges the current animals that exist, there's still a documentation of the sanitation and feeding plan. We want that in their file so that if there's ever concern, we can say, well, are you adhering to the plan in which you submitted? So I do think that it's important that any current kind of grandfathering is adhering to 122 and 123.
Yeah, I'd really like to see things documented rather than just a nod and a wink. And I think that's important. And there's a matter of equity too, that, you're holding somebody to one standard and letting somebody else get away. That's my feedback.
so that's not currently in the code. It just,
I think Attorney Mattson, it would be, if you wanted to pass this tonight, you would be adding that the exemption would include, that it would apply to section 122 and 123, right?
Well, I think it needs to be clarified exactly what the Planning Commission is recommending for exemption for existing property owners. I mean, do you want a property owner to be required to get a permit that's not in mountain residential and then comply with section 7-123, which is a minimum requirements for sanitation and feeding, fencing, minimum area requirements?
right, but my question was, that's currently not in there, at least I didn't see that.
So there's, related to the permit, it says that an property owner who has domestic hoof livestock as of the date that the ordinance is approved is exempted from the requirements of this section, meaning the section that requires the permit.
That's 123.
No, 122 is the permit
122.
section.
Right, but not for 123.
Correct. So they would still have to comply with 123 as it's written.
As it's written, okay. That was your concern? Yep.
Which sounds fair to me, right?
Yeah, for a matter of equity, I think people should be held to the same standards.
In terms of health and sanitation, for
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
Mhm.
I agree.
Okay, any other questions or comments before I open it up for public comment? Okay, if not, as I said, we'll come back to this. We'll open it up for public comment. Do we have anybody online?
Kathleen Dowden and Kathleen *6. I did have to mute you.
Okay. So please give your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Kathleen, if you're there, just a reminder to press *6.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We do.
We do, thank you.
Kathleen Shipai, Magnolia Star Route. As I've testified against this before, I'm testifying against it now. Unfortunately, there needed to be a key to the red line that was provided in the packet because it was the craziest, most colorful red lines. It did not make sense to me. I'm still against this, and I really want to touch on something. How many people's rights and use by rights have been just squashed tonight? And like I said with the parking language, this is, again, there needs to everyone that currently is allowed to have a horse, which is based, or a hooved animal, which is currently based on size of property, needs to be notified that they're going to be losing their ability to have an animal, because for all we know, there's like 5 people in town that might have wanted a hooved animal and can't afford it right now, or are getting it set up, and they're about to use property use right that they had when they bought their property. So this is insane to me on the hooved animals and how it is written, okay? And the inspection, the fact, again, the town attorney is going to say it's okay. There needs to be just cause when you go to somebody's place. And it's not the neighbor called and complained and we can come over unannounced anytime without notifying you and go on your premise. The way this is written is insane. It doesn't make sense. I appreciate that they took out the limit of 5 fish and 5 gerbils and 5 hamsters. Again, micromanagement of people's lives. This is not for the government. And I also want to say there has not been a single complaint ever on a hooved animal that was legitimate. Okay? There is nothing legitimate about rewriting the whole code when there were no complaints. All we needed to do was Fisher took an oath to uphold the code. When people called and said dogs are barking all night, she and Jen Feinlevin said there was nothing in the code to stop it from happening. That was misinformation. It was in the code. And all that needed to be done, because this is, by the way, the only reason I think that there's being a zoning change is the only reason to give it to the Planning Commission to have wasted 2 years on this, okay? Because you are limited to Chapter 16 and 17. And this is Chapter 7 nuisances. And there wasn't a nuisance problem with hooved animals that was legitimate. And there were nuisance problems with dogs barking. All that needed to be done in order to encompass all the animals is to take out dogs and cats and say any animal owned on any property that makes noises all night long or that smells over into the neighbors and ruins the neighbors' peace and happiness, that is a violation. I also don't like the fact that there isn't even a warning on any of these people just getting a ticket. And I don't like the fact that the town administrator is the sole person to decide if someone's going to lose their family members, which happen to have fur on them. It's insane. Okay. There needs to be some kind of oversight besides one person deciding. And yeah. Okay. Whatever.
Okay.
Fucking
we get the point. Thank you.
Fascist.
Okay, anyone else online? Okay. Close the public comment and bring it back to the Planning Commission. Before we go around, Mike, do you have any further comments on anything with regard to the ordinance, draft ordinance?
I do want to reconfirm so that regarding barking dogs and like collection of dog feces, like the littering part, specifically barking and nuisance dogs, this is enforceable and we have personnel to enforce it.
Correct. Yeah, we have a code. So we have a code enforcement officer, but now community planning also supports with code enforcement. So it's kind of a team. Yes, we can enforce this.
And in regard to Kathleen's comment about Chapter 7 jurisdiction of the Planning Commission, I believe, and Tom, you can, well, maybe it was before your time, but it came to the Board of Trustees directed us to look at this, even though it wasn't under our purview. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. That's how we got involved in this.
And now you can kick it back.
Hopefully.
Okay.
I guess I do want to respond to a few things though that Kathleen said, which which I had kind of struggled with at the beginning of all this too, which is, going back to what's the problem we're actually trying to solve here. So we had this one instance a couple years ago, I think but I kind of, with this whole, like, how much, land do you need for an animal? I mean, none of us on this planning commission or in town staff are experts on any of this. And so I do think that I do agree that some of this should just be covered in the nuisance. If someone wants to have more than 5 dogs, I don't really care. I don't want them barking all night. I don't want to see them pooping all over the road. But I don't care what you do in your house. That's your business. So there are parts of that which I do agree with her. But it's not clear to me what the problem is that we're trying to solve. It feels like a bit like a hammer looking for a nail. And that if the nuisance ordinance has components in it that address things like noise, smell, neighbor contamination, that kind of thing, then why is that not adequate? I think is the question.
So maybe I can speak to that. I think this became a kind of a repeal and replace in many ways. It was really an overhaul of the code as a whole, but where it started is the code wasn't clear enough about what animals were allowed and what were not. And so because that wasn't made clear, where it would reference like other domestic livestock, that wasn't defined. So then we would have to, as a statutory town, we would turn to state statute for that definition. And other domestic livestock has quite a large definition of animals. And so, obviously in some situations we had allowed certain animals, and there were some people in this community who felt like goats shouldn't be allowed because the old ordinance only talked about horses and llamas. And so as staff, we really needed clarity around what animals are allowed. And then there was a desire of the Board of Trustees when looking at what animals are allowed, that board at the time cared more about that health and sanitation and well-being and care of animals. And so the direction was to look at the code in its entirety to really assess, are we taking the necessary measures to ensure the protections and well-being of these animals? And that's where it really turned into a full repeal and replace, or a complete review of the ordinance from top to bottom.
So
So
I
what
think
you're
the thing,
saying
let me just respond to that one really quick,
Okay,
though,
go ahead.
which is that I frankly don't care what animal you have at your property, as long as it doesn't make a lot of noise or stink. If you want to have peacocks instead of chickens, as long as they're quiet peacocks, I don't care. I should sort of, we should be allowed to do that, I think. So I guess I go back to, why do we need to define every single type of animal that we want to allow versus just saying what those animals can't do to impact other people in the community?
Well, I think the biggest, Tim Duggan here, biggest thing is just clarifying and defining, what are these large hoofed animals, or however we call it, and what zones are those not allowed in, right? I think like that's the biggest issue, I think, and we're doing that here. Because before there was so much like in this gray area, we're like, well, what if I want a goat? Is that just like a horse, or can I have that in low density? Like we didn't have any code for that at all, which is why a big part of why we have this now.
Well, I think the issue you brought up, what problem we're trying to solve, I think what we're trying to do is to prevent a problem that we need to fix. I think that was the whole crux of why we were attempting to take a look at this and fix it before there is a problem. I don't.
Yeah, Tim Duggan here. Along those lines, yeah, I think some of this extra language in the code may be redundant because it's already covered maybe in the nuisance section. But I don't know how much of it is unreasonable, like having your dog be, have rabies inoculation. I mean, that's required anyways. Vicious animal regulation. I mean, again, it's probably redundant, but I don't think it's unreasonable.
I agree with you on that. I don't think it's unreasonable at all either. And I'm not, I think that there are portions in here that I think are good to clarify. I do think that there's other elements here that unclear to me. Like, why can't someone have more than 5 dogs? If none of them bark, what do you care?
Well, and it probably won't be a problem unless they really bother you as the neighbor, right? If they have 6 dogs, right? Otherwise, nobody would know or care that they have 6 dogs.
True, but I go back to, I can't remember if Steve was saying it earlier, of like, this is where you can get into that kind of tit for tat retaliation, and it's more about the personalities than about actual nuisance.
Sure, yeah.
So if those dogs aren't causing a problem, why do we need to regulate that as a town? I completely agree with you on the rabies thing, because that does impact other people, right? Having rabies in the community is not acceptable. Having dogs running around that bite, not acceptable. There's huge impacts to other people on both of those fronts. But we have a lot of dogs, and I don't know about it. I'm not sure. They're not impacting me. I'm not entirely clear why we're trying to regulate that.
Isn't that limited in the code elsewhere where it's like, if you have more than X dogs, then you have a kennel and you need a permit to have a kennel in these zoning districts. So that kind of takes care of that.
So Mike, let me jump in here. I believe the kennel code was in the older version of the code. Part of that was stricken out. And this limit on animals was like a way pared down attempt to prevent a kennel situation. I mean, I very much hear you, Stephanie. Like if I don't notice it, if the animals are being well cared for,
right?
I don't particularly care how many dogs or cats you have. But that's where it came from, and there was like a page and a half about kennels that, in my eyes, wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but this is Steve. But part of this code too is not just a nuisance or a neighbor issue, it's the protection of the animal itself, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's something we didn't
Yeah.
have at all in any of our code. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, there was some sanitation, but we've definitely really ramped up the sanitation, the law, all of the care for the animals, brought in some ordinance language from other municipalities to strengthen that and strengthen the expectations, that there are very clear, feeding and sanitation plans and well documented that the intent of this owner is to care for this animal and here's how they will do so. And then it's enforceable. This is what will be a part of your permit, is that you can't just say you're going to do, you're going to handle your manure in this way. You must adhere to what you've identified in your sanitation plan.
I feel like a fear amongst some of the public maybe that, their singular dog is barking and their grumpy neighbor calls them in at 11 o'clock at night, and then suddenly secret animal control services is like swooping into their house at 1 a.m. to invest. Like, that's not going to happen, right? So I don't know if we need some clarification or elimination with regard to that particular topic.
I mean, we've got this whole section related to noisy pets and animals, and that's kind of talking about the barking. And what we put in here is that it has to be a consecutive period in excess of 5 minutes or an accumulated period in excess of 90 minutes during a 24-hour period. You can't, just because the dog's barking, you can't just call us out. And you're going to have to prove it. Like, where we get a lot of calls being like, oh, so-and-so's dog was barking all night long. It's like, give us the proof.
Right.
Because that is going to be the responsibility of the complaining party, because our team is not going out in the middle of the night. And so, yes, unfortunately, that person will have to record this, and record it for 5 minutes and demonstrate to us that there is the violation of the code, because we don't just go out citing people just because someone called about a barking dog. We need that proof.
And to be clear, I'm fine with barking dog ordinances. I really am. I mean, I think that's exactly, that's again where you start to impact the people around you, and you start to impact the ability of other people to enjoy their space. I'm not opposed to that part at all. I think it's the parts of this that are, you could encapsulate in that nuisance in those nuisance protections, versus having to be so prescriptive and limiting. I'll also point out that in terms of the animal cruelty law, like Colorado State has laws around that. It's not just because the town doesn't do it, doesn't mean that you can just get away with it.
Took the words right out of my mouth. I was just going to point out that the animal abuse and neglect and animal cruelty laws is a severe criminal offense in Colorado.
Okay, any other comments? Let's kind of go around the room here and see where we are. So let's start with Jim Reese. We can. You're actually audible.
I figured out I had my settings set for internal microphone or something that was messed up. So I'm in favor of moving this along, and I think that this is a response to the lack of any clear regulation. It was requested by residents. It made its way to the town staff. It made its way to the BOT. They directed us to look at it. I think we're bordering on, not meeting the intent of the BOT by continually sitting on this and never advancing it on to them. If you disagree with a part of it, you're free to vote no. I think that I personally want to have some regulations so somebody doesn't have a giraffe, which is a hoofed animal, or a gazelle, or a pig. I mean, I think that we can't just say, all right, it's a free-for-all, and until it's a problem, we're not going to address it, because then once it's already there, we all know how, from the STR complaints about when there's an STR next door, how many people are unhappy that they're already there, and I'm trying to get compliance and I'm making complaints. You're already dealing with the problem. This is an attempt to try and put some regulations in place, which is what we do as a town here in America. We're a nation of laws. We put regulations in place. We say this is what we allow because this is what our community standards are. So you can't be all things to everybody. I think that an 80% or a 90% solution is at least enough to advance. And there is a mechanism if somebody wants to appeal this, they can go through the process, bring it up, get petitions, go before the BOT, ask for a code change. I think that we are literally, over 2 years on this issue that was directed to us by the BOT, and we should move this on to them. That's my comments, and I am in favor of voting in favor for it to be passed. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Chris?
I don't have any comments.
Okay, you happy with it as it is, or do you feel that it needs more work?
No, I'm happy with it. It's pretty thorough.
Okay. Stephanie, any further comments?
No, I think I've had my comments.
Okay. Timmy?
Yeah, not much than what I said already. Yeah, I think maybe some of it is maybe ultra specific and maybe redundant, but I don't think any of it is unreasonable at all. So I'm fine with it.
Okay, Tom?
I'm good.
Linda?
I'm ready to pass it back to the board.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, Mike?
As am I. And as I said before, I will write an email to the Board of Trustees when it comes in front about animals that I think maybe should be considered to be added, as well as the 7/122 and the permit required for hoofed animals. I think the inspection aspect of it needs to be reworked, but that is not going to stop me from passing it on to the Board of Trustees. Nothing is perfect. It's time to move it on.
Okay, and yeah, and I fully agree. I wanted to pass this on a year ago. But since then, in all fairness, a lot of work has gone into it, a lot of research. You guys have done a tremendous job, putting this together. I think it's a draft, and there may be some changes, but I think it is time for the board to weigh in on it. And because otherwise we just keep going around and around, and they may have actually some very constructive comments on how they want to proceed with this. So I'm in favor of moving it on. And like you said, the public has another option to weigh in on it. You have an option to maybe find some additional experts or testimony for the Board
Exactly.
of Trustees as well. So my view is, I think we should move it on. Okay, any other?
And I'm ready for you to
final
move it on.
comments? Any other final comments before we take a vote? Yep. Since you're on the committee. That's all right.
Long ordinance. Oh. Okay.
You ate up the bulk of the packet.
Yeah, sorry about that. This will be the last time, hopefully. Um, This is Commissioner Dye. I move to recommend approval of Ordinance 852, repealing and replacing Articles 5 and 6 of Chapter 7 of the Nederland Municipal Code related to the regulations of animals and domestic livestock, and amending sections 16-6 and 16-32 of Chapter 16 of the Nederland Municipal Code.
This is Commissioner Reese. I second.
Okay,
Chair Williams,
yes.
Vice Chair Reese, Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Glasser,
Yes.
Commissioner Rivera,
Yes.
Commissioner Herring.
Yes.
Okay. Passes. All right, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll come back, wrap things up, and if we get done before 10, it was pointed out to me, I went back and looked at the bylaws, and we are, I think, under the same jurisdiction as the Board of Trustees, that if we go past 10, we have to make a motion to extend. And it is in there, so maybe we can beat that deadline. Let's take a 5-minute break and come back. Let's do it. Let's try to finish
Let's
up
do
here.
it.
Okay. Let's reconvene. You want me to use this?
Ow.
Okay, ow. Yeah, I know. I could trap my. Okay, we're down to informational items. Miranda?
Can I say something just on the very tail end of the keeping animals? I forgot to acknowledge Miranda and Britt and Jennifer, who have been an amazing help and helped guide Roger, but mostly myself through this ridiculously complicated process. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we've
And I-
enjoyed supporting all your subcommittees and we're excited for everything to move on to the board.
I'll tell you, when I look through all of those red lines and everything, it's like, oh my God, this is an incredible amount of work.
Red lines, blue lines, and every other line.
Every other color line. We're running out of colors, so.
It's true.
Anyway, so Miranda, if you
Yep.
want to wrap up with two
Yes.
informational items.
So first thing is, of course, just reminding you of what's coming before the Board of Trustees and automatically a change. So just caveat, always check the packets. The board was supposed to adopt their 2024 budget next week, but with the passing, Governor Polis signed Senate Bill 23B001, which provided an additional property tax relief. And so we're not going to have all of the proper property tax information and certification to feel comfortable adopting the budget. Therefore, the state has changed some of the deadlines, which allow us to adopt our budget as late as January 10th. We want to make sure that the board is adopting a budget that has the correct mill levy and property tax information. So they're not going to adopt their budget next week. They'll adopt their budget on the 2nd of January. So what will happen at their meeting next week is everything you just did tonight, they get to do on the 5th. We had preemptively publicly noticed it and just wishful thinking that you would pass it all tonight. So everything you just did, all 6 ordinances, sit before the Board of Trustees, and that is all that's on their agenda, aside from a couple little consent items. Those consent items include Downtown Colorado Inc. has invited us to be a challenge community. And what that means is we're ideally looking at kind of best uses for public lots, right? You're moving through, you're allowing under special review use, new opportunities. And so really allowing an organization like Downtown Colorado to help us dive into appropriate uses for some of our public lots. And what they'll do is they'll provide like a parcel analysis. So talking to the board about doing that under consent. December 19th, then we're going to get started in the election world. It's hard to believe we're ramping up, but nomination petitions will go out on January 2nd and we're still finalizing the election calendar, but we believe the 22nd of January. It's a really quick timeline. So we'll just make sure that everyone understands how many seats are available, how many years, how you do the nomination petition, what the whole process looks like. So if you're interested in running, I think that's a great meeting to attend to hear the whole election process. Bohannon Houston will come to do the official housing needs assessment presentation, which of course will encompass everything you've done here. Rights of Nature is a resolution the Sustainability Advisory Board has been working on that appoints guardians who will oversee the watershed and provide recommendations. They've been working on that also probably for about a year, and so getting ready to bring that back for consideration. Town is working on some employee handbook changes, and we want to run those by the Board of Trustees for approval, just some language changes and some slight amendments. And then we do need a Board of Zoning Adjustment liaison. We are anticipating a variance application, and so we need, John Mountain was the liaison, and we need the board to appoint a new one. So the board has an exciting December, really busy. Hope is try to wrap up a lot of what was happening in 2023. From a town staff, oh, sorry.
Miranda, before you go forward,
Yeah.
quickly, this Commissioner Reese, can you tell me, did they decide to appoint a new board member?
It's complicated. What did they do? So they did not make a decision last night. They will make a decision next week. The statute language has changed in such a way that it looks like the board is leaning towards filling the vacancy through election. However, have the ability to also put out for appointment. So that's their intention, to put out applications for appointments. They'll interview applicants. However, if they don't feel that any applicant is appropriate, they don't have to appoint. And what will happen is they will just stay a short board of 6 until the April election. So if you're interested in serving, you could seek appointment. Although one of their criteria is that if you do seek appointment, you also intend to run, because that's all happening at the exact same time. You would only serve if you were appointed for 3 months. And would
So
need
there's
to
no
run.
time for special election. That's
No,
it.
there's no time.
Short staff.
Yeah, we need at least 60 days to prepare a special election, and you can't have an election if it's less than 90 days before the next regularly scheduled election, and there's just not enough time for us to run a special. So, yeah, I mean, they kind of have the best of both ways, and they'll ultimately decide if they want to appoint, but their intention is to open it up for appointment applications. After the holiday season though, too, where the application period, normally those are 21 days, and the board's looking at just a little over a month instead. So the the interviews are occurring in January. The other thing the board had mentioned last night too is wanting to make sure that any person who applies for the Board of Trustees goes through an orientation before they have their interviews, so that they sit down with staff and we can really go over what it means to be on the board, the time commitment, and an understanding of the expectations. And so sometimes there is a feeling that board members don't quite understand what they're getting into until they're on it and they're in the thick of it. And so trying our best as staff to really expose them to what that means in our expectations, community's expectations, and then of course what it means to serve.
Okay.
Other questions about what's coming before the board? Okay, we're doing this new thing where we're throwing all of our staff reports in, so enjoy that reading. It's quite a bit. 50 pages worth of staff reports. I think I just want to highlight a couple of things. So comprehensive plan kickoff happened on Monday with the Board of Trustees and town staff. The great thing about the comp plan is every other month they'll come before the Planning Commission to provide you an update, and that will start next month. Of course, will involve you in land use discussions, general comprehensive plan evaluations, and so you will see them every even month. More to come on that, but when they come to you in December, they'll go over their project scope and their public engagement strategy. Just kind of want to highlight the fun things. Y'all were invited to the volunteer appreciation party. I hope you will be able to attend. It's on December 7th at 5 o'clock. It's also time to complete the multimodal, at the community center. Time to complete the multimodal transportation plan. I sent you a last minute plea, but it's due on Friday. So if you haven't done your survey yet, we would ask for you to do your survey. You can drop pins to indicate where your concerns are. We're wrapping up branding and marketing. I'm going to start to look at designs in 2 weeks with our branding and marketing team. And of course, end of year is just busy kind of closing out financials. If you look at our budget, our budget is strained for 2024. I think what we've been really trying to reiterate is we're in such a great healthy position going into 2024 that while the board is budgeting in a deficit, year after year, we budget in a deficit and we don't end up there. I mean, we're very fiscally conservative as staff. We don't spend money if we don't have to. So that's what will end in 2023. You'll see that reflected. And so Brita's budget is in the end, but happy to answer any questions if you have anything about what is in all of these reports.
Just a quick question on the broadband. What is the time schedule? They said we're waiting for, eagerly awaiting for the outcome. Any idea when?
It was supposed to be 2 weeks ago, but it got pushed out, end of December, maybe. I mean, we're ready. If for some reason capital project funds don't work, we're ready to move that application right on to BEAD funding. And so Nederland, Gilpin, and Clear Creek will continue to remain a tight team and just move from funding source to funding source to get broadband extended to all of our areas.
Okay.
And the board has committed a $40,000 match for that, as well as all of the other jurisdictions we're partnering with. And that actually is going to go towards direct cost installation. And the hope is that we can assist individuals who might be a financial hardship if they're to connect once we extend the fiber network. We can utilize our match funding to help connect to their homes.
One other thing on the budget that I wanted to point out, speed cameras went down in flames.
We were calling them speed machines.
Yeah,
but,
speed machines.
That is something actually, thank you. I knew I was forgetting something for the 19th, but the board did ask me to meet with Sergeant Merriam to talk about maybe extra duty for traffic enforcement instead of speed cameras, looking at, what can the current officers do? And then what would happen if we paid for an extra duty officer who is just purely here to write tickets? So we learned that these officers are writing 10 to 15 tickets a day. So if you speed, recommend you don't because they're out there or do because we'll take the revenue, however you feel, or do. Yeah, and it was really great. We actually had 3 officers with us last night, which is great. I think if you haven't had a chance to interact with our Boulder County Sheriff's team, they're incredible. Nice to have them. We don't have the full pieces together. We have the sergeant and the 2 overnight deputies, and we should have the daytime here in the next couple months.
Okay. Other questions?
I just had one. Is this the Boulder County, our agreement with Boulder County, is that sort of the long-term plan at this point? Have we stopped any kind of search for Nederland town police?
Correct. Yeah. If the town ever wanted to return back to having a Nederland police enforcement, they have to give a year's notice to Boulder County. That would be pretty financially challenging because in that year, you'd also have to be simultaneously building your police force. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, but you're looking at $2 million in terms of giving, you've got a $909,000 contract with Boulder County, plus the rebuild of a police department is $1.2 million.
Yeah, it's our single biggest expense.
Got it. Thank you.
Stephanie had a question?
I mean, Linda?
Sorry,
Question
what?
on
Sorry.
the building back here, the structure that's being put back here,
The battery
the
storage.
battery storage. Is
Read-
there anything that's?
Yeah,
going
read
to
about
do
it
with
in
the
the
buzzing?
Mountaineer.
Yeah,
I wrote the article.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah,
Good.
that was helpful.
I'll send you the article.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a big thing. It's the first community microgrid in the United States that a utility paid for.
And the buzzing noise, is that going to be addressed? I mean, drive by it, the buzz is really loud.
Okay, I'll check that out. I'm talking with Excel about
Yeah.
this regularly, but I'll
Doing
check
a
it out.
great job. It's just, it buzzes
Oh,
continuously.
I didn't know that. Do you want to
Okay,
check it out and let me know?
maybe I'm the wrong person because I don't hear so well.
We can definitely follow up.
Yeah.
The buzzing.
A couple of the neighbors asked. me
Okay,
on that.
yeah.
Okay. Any other business? No. And I'll make a motion to adjourn that clock's a little fast. Right at 10 o'clock.
Obviously.
Is there a second?
Second.
And anyone opposed? Okay, meeting adjourned at 10:01.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming online.
Okay, well done. I didn't think it
All right,
could be
now
done.
let's check time.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good Christmas, you guys.